Roger.
Present.
And I'm super sorry, but I can't see anything, and you're Miguel.
Miguel?
Yeah.
And David.
Yes.
Present.
David,
Present.
Tillman,
Present.
William,
Present.
Anna,
Present.
Jennifer,
Present.
Gabriella,
Present.
Irv,
Present.
Katie.
Present.
Yes. And Sarah Beth's present. Thank you.
Same.
All right.
All right, calling the Union 26 to order at 6:33 p.m. So, Sarah Bess,
Present.
William,
Present.
Jennifer,
Present.
Katie,
Present.
Irv, present.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public that would like to make public comment? No. Okay. Oh, yep, great.
Good evening. Good evening. Is this on?
Yes.
All right. My name is Keith McFarland. I'm a teacher here, a coach here at the high school. I'm APEA representative, and I just wanted to take the time to introduce myself and explain my continued attendance at these meetings for the purpose that I'm here for. I am here as an APEA representative and observer. I report back to the APEA Representative Council. And the main goal is to foster communication between the union and the district, or the school committee, in support of a professional dialogue, proactive, cooperative, collegial. I sit on the Frontier Regional School Committee. It's a school committee that's very similar to the makeup of this one for small towns. I've served on the Sunderland Elementary School Committee, so I've done both sides of it. I know what you're faced with, what you deal with, the hard decisions that you have to make. So the whole purpose is we have found that having face-to-face communication, having somebody in the room is much more beneficial than not ever seeing anybody. So I sit and observe, and I come back to the union, and you all have full-time jobs. You can't get into the building. You don't know what's always going on day to day, the minutia of what's going on, and I'm here to just try to provide a perspective and to foster communication. As part of that, the APA would like to just say that they express gratitude for the hard work of the Superintendent Search Subcommittee, the efforts that they have put in to hear all voices, to bring in all constituents of the town. The work of selecting a superintendent is vitally important. It's one of the most important things that you can do. And coming up is next year is one of the first things that the new superintendent is going to have to do when they start in June or July is they're facing a contract year right away. So last year being retroactive, this year being the second, next year being the third. It's going to be negotiations right away, and we want to make sure that we have professional, proactive, collegial relations for a fair, equitable, thoughtful contract. That being said, just want to remind the committee, I know I've said it before, but as I'm talking about the next contract, the union leadership has not received a prior one yet. I know it's out of this body's hands, but I'm just a reminder that they would like to see that. My experience has a little bit more free-flowing public comment. I know this one's a little bit more controlled, but I'm happy to answer any questions at any time for any perspective, and I would keep my comments short and responsible and professional. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. And we received one written comment, which is displayed on the screen. they're joint.
There are no minutes.
There are minutes. If you click on minutes.
Updates from the search
Nope,
committee.
click on the minutes. And then view minutes.
All right. So why they didn't have this by October?
'Cause
Usually that's
that's-
what happens.
It's attached a different way.
All right. So, are there any additions or comments on terms of the minutes? These were a committee, Amherst Regional Union 26 School Committee on Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. Huge number of hands. All right, William.
Go ahead. I'm just very confused because it has members present, and I don't think all those people were present for October 26th. What I'm reading, and I was present, no?
August.
Oh, August, oh,
Generated on that.
okay, sorry,
It's
I
way
apologize.
back there in August.
Never mind, I will be quiet.
Tillman,
I want to commend the formatting of the minutes. They're very nicely readable. Thank you.
Sasha, if you're listening, thank you. Who else down there? Anyone else? I don't see any others. Oh, Sarah Beth, she's right next to me.
So under procedural E, says that we needed a new chair for the region because Allison McDonald has resigned, but it was actually Ben Harrington.
All right. That change will be noted. Any other? No other, so I would entertain a motion to accept these minutes with the additions as recorded.
I'll second it. Oh, I think you have to do it for Union 26.
And are we only doing Union 26?
I think both committees
All right,
have to,
so anyway, Union 26, we need
I'll still second it for Union 26.
we got both of them seconded for Union 26.
You have to do a roll call vote.
And, all right, we'll do it for Union 26 because I was thinking maybe we would be doing them for the region also, but we're gonna do them for both. It
We
has
have to
to be
take
for
two separate
two
votes.
separate votes. What we're doing for Union 26, roll call vote for those in favor of accepting the minutes. So, Jennifer,
Yes.
William,
Abstain?
Sarah Beth,
Yes.
Katie,
Abstain.
Irv, yes.
Right. So I will make a motion, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended for the region.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Roger.
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Nope, that's fine. Tillman,
I
William,
I abstain?
Anna,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Gabriella,
Abstain.
Irv,
Aye.
Katie,
Abstain.
and Sarah Beth, aye. 4 abstentions? Okay. Thank you. All right.
All right, next agenda item is the update from the Superintendent Search Committee. And the documents are present, were sent out, so Jennifer?
Sure, and just to be clear, it's the superintendent search subcommittee. But I know it's going to be confusing because we are going to have a superintendent search committee. I want to make sure that we're talking about the right bodies. So the subcommittee met today, and we have 3 things we want to share with the joint committees. One is the search committee interest form. 2 is the search committee outreach plan, and we're hoping to get the joint committee's approval for both those things today. And the 3rd is the superintendent job posting, and this is sort of the initial, actually it isn't the initial, but this is just one sharing of it, and we are planning on having the joint committees vote on it next time, so we won't be voting on that today. So maybe if the first thing that could be shared is the search committee form PDF. So I'm going to look at it on my screen instead of turning around, but we're going to be looking at the same thing. So this is this is going to be an online form and a paper form for people to express interest in serving on the superintendent search committee. So I won't read it out loud, but you can read the introduction. So I think a few things I want to point out are the deadline to submit of January 2nd. So, first of all, assuming we get the approval of these bodies today, we're thinking that this will go live, like be available online and have paper copies available by December 1st. You'll see in the outreach plan that there's some logistics involved in getting this up and running, and that it would be open until January 2nd, so it'll be open for a full calendar month. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is that in one of our previous meetings, a school committee member asked about the possibility of having form submissions be anonymous, so not connected with a name, having an email address but not a name. And the subcommittee discussed that, and we ultimately decided that we need to have names associated with email addresses, specifically because, so we talked about having 15 to 20 people on this search committee. It's going to be a large committee, and that's a good thing. If we have more than 20 people express interest, the subcommittee will have to figure out how we want to suggest to the joint committees which 20 people we want to suggest to be on the committees. And then we want to be able to tell the public, here are all the people who submitted their names, here are all the people we're recommending and why. And we want it to be transparent about who is going to be on the committee and who we're not suggesting to be on the committee. And why, and we want that process to be transparent. My experience in talking with Amherst constituents has been that sometimes the appointments to committees feels like it's like done in a black box and no one really understands who submitted their name and who was accepted and who wasn't accepted, and once the committee's formed, who else submitted their name but wasn't on the committee. So we want this to be as transparent as possible. So we're going to tell people when they submit the form that your name and the statement that we're asking people to give, those 2 things will not be held confidential. Those 2 things will or may or will be made public. But the boxes that you check indicating the stakeholder groups you identify with, that information will be held confidential, but your name and your 2 to 3 sentences about why you want to serve will not be confidential. And we feel like that this is important for transparency. So those are things that I wanted to point out about the form. The other thing is, let's see, we have a bunch of groups, like stakeholder groups, and as we've discussed, we expect that any one person who submits this form is probably going to check more than one of these boxes. I think the one thing we may have added since the last time we showed this to you is experience living with poverty, which is a thing that we discussed a bit. We wanted to make sure we were including people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We weren't quite sure how to describe that, but I talked with I talked with Alicia Walker, who is a town councilor who has been open about making sure that she's representing low-income households, and she suggested that wording. And that could be like, you grew up in poverty and that's your experience living with poverty. So we wanted to make sure that we're bringing in that lens. So that's one thing that was added to the list. I think that's all I wanted to say. Do any other subcommittee members want to say anything about the form? And I want to say thank you to Margaret Stancer, who couldn't be here, who's the one who has been dealing with the Google form and making the changes in the Google form.
All right. Any members have any questions, comments? I see Tillman. And
Thank you. I think that's a very nice form, and I like the way you described the process. May I request that being a resident of Leverett and being a resident of Shutesbury be added to the list, because there are specific parents and staff call out for Amherst and Pelham, and it's theoretically possible that we could end up with a committee that does not have anyone from Leverett or anyone from Shutesbury, and I think that would be an omission.
Jennifer?
So we talked a little bit about this today in our subcommittee meeting, and we certainly, I'm not against that in theory, and we don't want to, obviously, we certainly don't want to exclude Shutesbury and Leverett. So obviously, as we all know, Shutesbury and Leverett send their students to the middle school and high school, but the Shutesbury and Leverett elementary schools are not within the superintendency. So, you know, Shutesbury and Leverett families can submit, you know, as a middle school parent or high school parent or guardian, or as a member of the community. I guess specifically today we talked about adding Shutesbury Elementary and Leverett Elementary families as part of this list, and we decided not to because of what I just said, like those schools are not within the superintendency. I'm open to adding them. I'm not opposed to adding them. I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Katie?
Thank you. It's not in response to that immediate comment, but I just want to thank you all for your work and the thought that you put into whether to disclose anonymity or not. It sounds like the rationale makes sense. My question is, in terms of how this form will be disseminated and making sure that people have equal access to it, if you all have thought that through. Thanks.
Wait a minute. Jennifer, you want to answer her question?
Yeah, just to answer that, we're going to share that in the next document, which is the outreach plan.
Anyone else down there? Gabrielle?
In response to the question about adding parents from Shutesbury and Leverett, so parents who have children in the Shutesbury and Leverett elementary schools, eventually, if they stay in those areas, will have children who are in the schools under the superintendency, and so legitimately they would have an interest in that superintendent and who they are and what they're like. So from that perspective, I support it. I will just say in general, with respect to the stakeholder list, is that there are a lot of items on here, and any item that we put on here implies that we're trying to balance having those groups. So the more we add, I think the more challenging it's going to be for the SSS to, actually do what we intend with this list. So I would weigh those two. I actually support adding the parents and staff of the Shutesbury and Leverett schools. One possibility is to bundle those together, basically.
Let's see. Tillman had his hand up before, then I'll come back to you, Sarah Bess, and then Anna.
Just to clarify, I think it would be sufficient to just ask for a resident of the town. I'm not asking specifically for a parent or any other role. My argument is that we're sending $1.5 million of our taxpayers' money to the region, which we, love supporting. But it would be hard to justify not ensuring that at least one person is there to represent that.
All right, Sarah Bess?
I am inclined to want to include a Leverett and a Shutesbury person. I think there are many, like, Gabrielle said, there are many boxes here, and it's very easy to double down on a few things, but I think making sure, you know, Leverett and Shutesbury are just as much of the part of the region as Amherst and Pelham are. So I think that is an important piece. And, you know, there are things that come up that are specific to Leverett or to Shutesbury, right? Like, they have, you know, it snows more in out there than it does down here at the bottom of the hill. So I think it's important to have those things be recognized. So I think having, like someone said, a community member, a parent, a person who lives there, whatever, to be included in that list.
William?
Could we just add a box, or 4 boxes, 1 resident of Amherst, a box that says resident of Pelham, a box that says resident of Leverett, and then a box that says resident of Shutesbury? So then those boxes could be checked?
What I would like to do is to have the SSS take this under advisement and make the changes if they deem it so necessary, rather than trying to make that decision here tonight. Jennifer?
Thank you, Irv. And so I guess my question is, you're suggesting that the subcommittee take it under advisement, and then would you also want us to come back to let you know what we've decided?
No, our assumption would be that you would note it, take action on it.
That seems acceptable to me, subcommittee. Okay.
Anyone else? Because I have some. Yes, Jennifer?
Sorry, so this conversation's making me think also that, do we want to have some sort of overarching requirement for submitting, which is that you should either live in one of the 4 towns, or work in one of the schools, or have a student in one of the schools, as opposed to like identify as BIPOC, but you don't live in the community. I don't know, I don't know if we want to have some sort of overarching, please, at least minimum requirements for filling out the form.
Sarah Bess?
I think that is an excellent idea. I think we want people to have a vested interest in this school, in these schools, and having them be somehow a member of that, right? So, a member of the 4-member towns, one of your kids goes here, you work here, somehow, like, you should have a vested interest in how this actually happens for the people that are going to live these choices.
Okay.
Right, and that's almost the very definition of a stakeholder for the region and Union 26. Gabrielle?
I would say that could be a sentence or two that's in the upper area rather than being another set of boxes.
All right, so I have, the question I have, we have identify as Black and then identify as BIPOC, but we don't have anything that says Hispanic or non-Hispanic, which would be part of even the census has that in it. So what was the reasoning for not having that? Jennifer?
We had identify as BIPOC first, and then a community member who came to public comment asked us to add identify as Black also, because she felt that she felt that, well, I'm not going to paraphrase, I think you all heard her words, that she wanted to make sure that there was Black representation, not assume that would be covered under BIPOC.
Interesting. And what about Hispanic or non-Hispanic? It's not even mentioned here at all. And the question is, why is that missing? Anyone from the Triple S?
I was just going to say, I think it's a document that we're working on, so I'm glad you brought that to our attention.
All right. You know, the thing is, identify as black, identify as BIPOC is in my mind is problematic. But someone who says, hey, I want to identify as black, but I don't want, if I put myself down as identifying as BIPOC and BIPOC includes black, I don't understand the difference. But if there's someone out there who says there's a big difference, I don't see the difference. Yes. Gabrielle.
So I made a comment about that same point last time we met. Being Hispanic, it struck me as odd that it's not specifically in there. Although if I had seen only the word or the acronym BIPOC, that's the one I would know to check. I wonder if this situation could be helped by putting parentheses after BIPOC and writing out what it means, right? Just writing out the words that belong in the acronym such that then it's made clear what is intended to be part of that.
Anna.
So I think there are a lot of Hispanic people that don't identify as people of color. And so I think it's worth adding a checkbox for Hispanic, identify as Hispanic.
We also have that right there.
Historically marginalized. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get everything.
Yes, it is. All right, Jennifer.
So I want to ask the group and anyone who wants to answer, is Hispanic the term we want to use, or is Latinx the term we want to use, or I just want to ask what's going to be most inclusive?
I think Latin E or Latin teen, I think is the newest, most updated word that includes the LGBTQ queer community, because they don't feel like that they're being represented with Latinx or Latin, so it's Latin teen.
Latin what?
Latin teen, I believe, is the latest verbiage.
Well,
I wouldn't even know how to relate to that.
Katie.
Well, I'm just thinking it's a question of how we're defining. And from my understanding, Hispanic is someone who is from a Spanish-speaking country, not necessarily a Latin Central American country. So the two terms are very different. So I guess my question is, if we already have a linguistic component on the form, do we want to specifically specify Hispanic, which insinuates someone coming from a predominantly Spanish-speaking country, is how I understand it, but maybe there's differing definitions.
Well, Tillman.
So instead of reinventing the wheel, why don't we just take the definitions that the U.S. Census Bureau uses, which separates race and Hispanic heritage, or Hispanic, Latino, and Spanish. I'm just worried that if we come up with our own definitions, we introduce some assumption that we want certain people or not, and I feel that's outside the purview of the committee to go into these definitions, so I would use what's broadly accepted while probably imperfect.
All right, I would like to have the SSS take that into consideration, look at it in terms of how the Census Bureau deals with it and whether that would be appropriate, and make a decision as to what that should be. We then, this committee, will go along with your decision-making on that.
So I make a motion to approve the form and with edits recommended by the SSS.
I second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and second. Is there any further discussion? William, your arm is not long enough, but I can see it.
Tillman.
Tillman, I mean.
in your motion, you're saying the changes recommended by the SSS or by the regional school committee?
Yes. So what Irv was suggesting is that we should just fix it, and
Yeah,
that would be okay, so by the SSS.
Okay, because I felt that there was recommendations made by the school committee to the SSS to make changes.
Okay, so the SSS is gonna take those under advisement and make the changes that they feel are necessary, and this vote is to allow that to happen.
Yep,
And
understood.
with
Thank
no
you.
further approval necessary.
Any other comments, discussion? If not, are we gonna do this both by union and region? We have to do it two. So I'm gonna do, by, region, by Union 26.
We can't, because Anna is part of the region.
Sorry, that's Sarah Bess, you have to do it.
It's fine. Okay, Roger,
Aye.
Tillman,
Aye.
William,
Aye.
Anna,
Anna?
aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Gabriella,
Aye.
Irv, aye.
Katie,
Aye.
and Sarah Bass, aye. So, passes unanimously. Okay. Okay.
I make a motion to pass the same thing that Anna said. Can I say that? For the region?
For the union.
Oh, for the Unit 26, sorry.
Do I hear a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, I'll do a roll call. Sarah Bess,
Aye.
William,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Irv. Yes. And Katie,
Aye.
unanimous.
Thank you all. So the next thing we want to talk about is the outreach plan. So if, oh, you've got it up, awesome. So in order to get the word out as widely as possible to our community and the broader community, so the subcommittee suggests the following about the form. Translate it into the language that the district typically translates district information into. Have paper forms available at all school main offices, all schools being the 5 school buildings that are within the superintendency. It's 5, right? Keep forgetting. That's more. We would, is it 5? 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6, 7.
One Pelham,
Summit
3
account.
elementary,
4,
1 high
5, 6.
school, 1 middle school,
6.
6 buildings.
Thank you.
Summit doesn't count.
I think Summit's within, is Summit within the high
Summit
school?
is inside the high school.
Okay, so 6 buildings, thank you. We would ask the superintendent to include a posting about this in the superintendent's update, maybe at least twice, because I think that goes out every week. Ask principals to send it out, ask PGOs to send it out, ask the family center to send it out, with their constituents. We can publicize it and mention it at all of our meetings in the next couple of next month or two. Work with the towns to post on their websites, ask ARP's social media, town social media, postal mailing, which I'm going to come back to, a press release to the local press. Perhaps the region and Union 26 chairs could submit an editorial to the Gazette and the Indy, sending out a message via the Parent Square app, which is used by regional students and families. Hard copies available for school committee members to bring to subcommittee meetings, and then create a flyer that has information about both accessing the online form and the fact that paper forms can be picked up at the school buildings to post in public libraries in the 4 towns. I'm going to go back to postal mailing because this is something that I think this school committee hasn't really thought of or done before, but I think it's like relatively inexpensive to do a postal mailing using the post office's, it's called EDDM, where it's like you don't need to have addresses and names for everyone. It's like when you receive something that says postal customer, like that if we wanted to, I don't know, if you wanted to do a postal mailing, it's not expensive, but not cheap and not free, obviously. So that's something that could be considered. And then we wrote a short blurb that could be used to publicize this opportunity. So these are the ideas that the subcommittee generated. We are definitely open to other ideas and thoughts. I'd love to hear from our student reps about ways that you guys think we can get the word out to more people. There are going to be students, at least one, hopefully two students on the subcommittee. So I'd love to hear any input or suggestions on
Specifically high school students.
high school students. Sorry, yes.
So, let's open up. Anyone want to ask a question, make a comment, any further discussion? I hear Katie.
The only additional way of disseminating this I was thinking about is maybe the committees on which we serve. Sometimes it's applicable in terms of like CPAC or MPAC. That would just be another observation or another venue we could share it with.
Jennifer.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, we can ask each committee member to share it with the committees that they serve on. We do have a thing that says hard copies available to school committee members to bring to subcommittee meetings. But, you know, like in addition to bringing hard copies, if you go to a virtual meeting or whatever, to mention it at your subcommittee meeting, that's a great idea.
Yes.
If students are welcome on the search committee, then I think really emphasizing that fact is important to encourage student participation. Because I mean, I didn't even know that students were allowed to be on that. So if it's going to be distributed around our school, I think that should be something that's really emphasized.
Is that William?
I'd say maybe we should post the flyer in the school cafeterias, specifically so the students could see it.
Gabrielle?
Is there a student newspaper or student social media or some sort of platform where information gets distributed to students that students actually look at? Respond.
Yes?
Yes, there are multiple social media accounts that we are able to post on, and yes, I think posters with QR codes are a good way that we've reached out to students in the past.
Anyone else? Gabrielle?
I wanted to comment on the postal mailing idea. I think it's a really good idea. I think that, you know, it could be as simple as a postcard size mailing. And one particular reason for this is that we've talked about having people who are members of the community and engaged in some other way. And the large majority of these bullets really are going to go to people who have a current association with the schools. And so having a postal mailing that goes out to everybody, we will be able to inform people who maybe no longer have a connection with the schools or who are community members but aren't necessarily specifically connected with the schools but are interested. So I support that idea.
Anyone else? You know, I would encourage the SSS in terms of postal mailing, look at the cost. Because there's this whole postal mailing called every door, every box, and there is a cost to that. So if you can check that cost out, because we wouldn't want to have this be a cost that might be overly prohibitive. Anna?
Would that be all 4 towns?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That could
William,
end up
I
getting-
mean Tillman.
Still talking, but thanks. A quick internet search indicates that it's around 40 cents per piece for around 10,000 pieces. So I Googled the number of households in Amherst, so it would be around $40,000.
4,000.
No?
4,000.
It should be.
Sorry, 10.
William, I mean Tillman.
Yes.
Tillman,
okay.
come on, Tillman.
It's late. I'm sorry. $4,000. Yes.
And now it's William.
I was just gonna say, I've done mailers as a real estate agent, and I mail all of Pelham, and it's just like $80. So I don't think those figures are right. If we do our own printing, we'll look into it and see what the
Right,
figures
I
are.
think you should look into it because there are a lot of people here who just went through an incredible election campaign and they can tell you what mailing costs are. So,
Well, it's much cheaper if the SSS also might take on printing and taking the postcards to the post office, which is cheaper than if you order it online and they ship it out for you.
all
So
right.
we can look into it.
All I'm saying is, you take that in consideration, bring it, if you're gonna do it, that's gonna have to be approved by us anyway, because that's an expenditure. If you're gonna expend funds for doing this particular postal thing, and it has some kind of impact on the budget in terms of what is already there, we need to know what that is. All right. Jennifer, do you require a vote on this, or do you not?
It's not required, but the previous vote wasn't required either. It would be good to just have a similar vote to what we did for the forum, which is that the committees, I don't know how to say it, approve of the outreach plan with the input that was given by the joint committees.
Gabrielle?
Regardless of whether we vote or not, I do want to make another suggestion about the paragraph blurb that is suggested here, and taking into account the comments that our student members made. There should probably be a sentence in there specifically stating that the committee will have at least one and possibly two high school students, and so we encourage students to apply.
I agree.
So noted.
All right, I really do not believe we need to vote on this. And if there is a strong sentiment that we should vote on it, then we should do so. But I really do not believe we need to vote on it. So without that, we'll move to the next.
Oh, okay, so, the next item is superintendent job posting. So, we did some research on current superintendent openings, and most of them have a document. The MASC verbiage is called a brochure, and I think that our MASC rep who came to talk to us even talked about a brochure. And the brochure has like an introduction, timing, contact information, requirements and qualifications of the job and bullet points, and then a description of the districts, highlights of the districts, description of the community, description of the municipal governments. So we've shifted a little bit from the multi-page, multi-bullet point detailed job description that we shared a month or two ago to a more high-level document. And what we discussed in today's subcommittee meeting is that we would like these bodies to approve a draft of specifically items 1 through 4 on this document that will then be given to the search firm. Because the search firm are going to be our partners in publishing the job posting. So, but I think it's important for these bodies to agree on and approve the meat of the job posting, which is the requirements and then the requirements and qualifications. So this is the first look at this document. We're going to discuss it tonight and then discuss it in our next meeting. And it won't. We weren't intending to vote on it tonight. Does that make sense so far? So. Section 4, well, there's the introduction sentence and then timing, and some of that isn't finalized yet. And then the requirements and qualifications is the thing that we wanted to get input from these two bodies on. So again, the subcommittee met today, and we have 4 items under requirements. So we landed on 10 years of experience in education, including administrative or district level role in a public school setting, 2 years experience as a superintendent preferred, a master's degree or doctorate, and eligible for state certification as a superintendent. And then we have this list of demonstrated abilities, should have demonstrated abilities in these items. So I would love to hear any input, comments, or questions.
All right, Gabrielle.
So I noted that you have bringing a new school building online under the demonstrated abilities. It is, of course, going to be a huge part of what our new superintendent does. My question is whether we think that there are a lot of people who already have the experience with bringing a school online, or are there different types of experiences that would still make a person qualified for doing that, even if they haven't done it in the past. What I'm worried about is that putting that in there might disqualify people or discourage people, even though they would, it's something they would be able to do, but can't necessarily demonstrate that they've already done it. And so I wonder how we might want to address that particular skill.
Let me get Katie first, since she's hanging out there on the screen. Katie?
Thanks. I would love to hear people's input about whether that 10 years of experience in education, if we really specify classroom teaching experience. I know that's oftentimes, like as a previous educator myself, it's something I always wanted my leadership to have was classroom experience. So opening that up for discussion.
Jennifer?
So first, to address Gabriella's question, I think that's a really good point. I will note that we say the superintendent should have demonstrated abilities. It said must at one point, and we changed it to should. So that maybe that addresses that if you don't have exactly every one of these bullet points, that doesn't disqualify you. I mean, just based on, I don't know if that addresses it or not.
Anna?
So I think there's a difference between demonstrated abilities and demonstrated experience. And so when you say abilities, that doesn't mean you've done it before. It means that you have demonstrated that you would be able to do it.
Okay.
So I think that's.
Do you want to address Katie?
Anyone else? Jennifer?
So let's see. Regarding Katie's question about classroom experience, I think that's I'm fine with that. I think that's a good addition. Are you okay? I mean, I guess my suggestion would be to just add it to that bullet point. So 10 years of experience in education, including classroom teaching, comma, administrative or district level role. Does that sound good to everyone?
So,
Can I,
Anna,
does anyone disagree with that?
with what? With,
Gentlemen.
With having
What-
classroom teaching listed.
we're not gonna vote on this unless there's a huge opposition. All right. Tillman?
So requirements are things that people absolutely must have, if I understand correctly, which means that if somebody does not have it, but they're still a great candidate, we could not possibly hire them. Therefore, I would try to keep requirements to really fundamental things like the eligibility to be a superintendent. That's really required. There's nothing you can do around. If somebody has a really great track record as a superintendent in a similar district, they've done spectacular work, but they happen to have not been a classroom teacher, we would not be able to hire them. And I just wanted us to be aware of that. I'm not saying that we have to go one way or the other. I just want to keep requirements to a minimum to avoid that we end up in a situation where we can't hire somebody legally because we put too many constraints on that phrase.
Jennifer?
So, let's see. First, the fact that the title of this is requirements, we could just change that to some other word. I don't know, as opposed to requirements, because the second bullet point does say 2 years as a superintendent preferred, and the subcommittee specifically discussed whether having experience as a superintendent already is preferred or required. My personal feeling is that I would like to see us hire someone who's been a superintendent before. I think it's not uncommon for a district to hire someone to be a superintendent who's never been a superintendent before. They've been an assistant superintendent, they've had other administration roles. But for me, for where we are right now, I would like to hire someone who's been a superintendent before, just for where our districts are. My subcommittee members disagreed with that and felt that if we require that you've been a superintendent before, then that privileges people who have been superintendents before, who are possibly more likely to be white and male. And so if we want, a wide and diverse candidate pool, a wide search and a diverse candidate pool, that we should not make that a requirement. and that someone could be qualified and be ready and be the right person and not have served as a superintendent before. So this is bringing up those things as well. So that's something that we wanted to discuss as a group. So, and so if we have something that's preferred under a list that says requirements, that's a little confusing. We should probably work on the wording. That being said, I feel like it's probably unlikely for a superintendent, other than like an interim superintendent position, to be an experienced superintendent and not have had classroom teaching experience. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe it's common, but it's probably uncommon. And so yeah, if someone's been a superintendent but doesn't have classroom teaching experience, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think if we want them to have classroom teaching experience, then and I'm okay with having that as a requirement.
Roger.
Well, you all as a committee have done more than you can imagine, because you have, the superintendent should have demonstrated abilities in teaching in a public setting. I mean, you're stepping on it without, and I'm not sure that it has to be a requirement. This is an old classroom teacher speaking, because you've mentioned it as what we would say demonstrated abilities in. And I think that in a public setting. I didn't know what you even meant by that, except for when you started this discussion. I said, well, you already have it. But, okay.
Before I get you, Gabby, when I look at this, it says 10 years of experience in education. It doesn't define what that means. I mean, because I could look at that and say, yes, it's 10 years of education means classroom teaching experience or other kinds of experience within an educational setting. Anyway, Gabrielle?
So I was gonna suggest that between the bullets that are titled requirements and the bullets underneath that, there can be a section titled preferred. And you can put in some of the things that don't quite rise to the level of requirements, but that you certainly, it's basically letting candidates know that if they have those, that they're going to be in a stronger position. And that if not, that they can make the argument stronger by addressing more of the other ones. I've commonly seen that in job postings.
Katie?
I think I would just recommend that you go forth, the SSS go forth and make this as, I guess for lack of a better word, vague as possible, because in the end, it's really going to be a collective group of whoever subscribes to this search committee who is going to really hash out what the evaluation criteria will be, if I understand the process correctly. So keeping it rather inclusive, vague, so that we're getting a lot of candidates, and later on, everyone will choose the evaluation criteria, if that makes sense.
Jennifer?
So I do think you're right that the search committee, which hasn't been formed yet, ultimately their job is going to be to evaluate the candidates and put forth finalists. But we as the school committees can give some strong direction by having these requirements, if we choose to. I think you're right, we can make it broad and vague, but do we necessarily want to?
Gabrielle?
I believe that this job posting, by the timeline that we've discussed in the past, the job posting is going to be out there before the search committee is active. And so the way that we describe these qualifications actually needs to be determined by this, input of these committees to the SSS, and then having that go to the search committee or the search firm that gets selected. So I do think that we need to know that that's not going to be in the hands of the search committee because the timeline shows that they're not even active by the time this is posted.
I heard Katie.
Then if that is the case, I will really advocate that we do require some teaching classroom experience in our requirements on behalf of all the teachers in the district.
Anna.
So I think we can create a category called preferred qualifications that we can put some of these not quite so requirements into. And then we can, I guess I'd like to hear some other input about the teaching experience requirement. And I don't know if we can go to the public and see if any of them have insights. And then maybe we can specifically say, if you have an opinion about teaching experience, please let us know. And because we aren't voting on this tonight, this is just to get some feedback. And please give us some more feedback before we meet again in 2 weeks.
All right.
Can I ask
So,
a question?
yeah, go ahead.
When is your next SSS meeting?
So November 20th, we will be reviewing all of the proposals, but apparently we also will need to be revising the job description. We meet before each of the joint meetings, so November 20th.
November 20th? Just to give people a time, if they're going to, if anybody wants to email the region or any one of us directly, then we can make sure that the SSS gets that feedback, but we would need it before, like, the 19th,
Right.
so you can have it for the 20th? Okay.
Wait a minute. November 20th is the meeting of the SSS?
Yep.
And at that meeting, are you going to be making any decisions?
We don't, so the intention of the November 20th meeting is to review all of the proposals that we receive from search firms. And then we will, as a subcommittee, decide which search firms to recommend to the joint committees at the November 28th meeting. So we don't decide, but we will decide, like, on a recommendation to the full committees. And we will also either need to add a meeting or at the same meeting, work on revising the job posting.
All right, so here's where I think we are in relationship to this posting, is that, I believe that the feedback has been really good, and that the SSS will take that into consideration, go back, make whatever changes you have, and then bring it back to us.
Yes.
Anyone else? Yes?
Is there anything else information that we could give to the SSS that would be helpful? I know you have a lot on your plate looking at your next meeting, but is there something that could be helpful that we could give you more direction about?
Yeah,
I feel like it's vague.
I guess I was hoping for more input on the have demonstrated abilities in, like that
Yes.
list is, we came up with some of those items, but I would love to, if you think there's something missing or something that's not clear, that would be great.
I like all those items. The only thing is, I have no idea how you're going to operationalize them in terms of saying, well, how do you demonstrate managing of complex budgets, or demonstrate administrative leadership, or demonstrate building communities with families and community members. Those are the kind of things I look at and say, all right, those are really, really nice things. They sound good. But in terms of practicality, how does one who's sitting on a committee make those judgments? And Gabrielle.
Sarah has had her hand up before me.
That's part of what you're doing when you're on a search committee weeding through applications, right? So this is the things that we're saying, in order for you to come be a part of this, these are the things we need for you to be able to show us that you have done, have experience with, and so then people know what to bring to tell us or show us how they have accomplished these things.
Mm-hmm.
And for each individual, it's going to look different because they're all coming from different places and different circumstances and different experiences.
All right. I don't want this to be debated, I'm making that observation. Gabrielle?
I just want to add to Sarah Bess's explanation of that. And the addition is that it empowers the search committee to then, you know, in their interview process, to delve into some of these things. Could you tell us about a time when you were involved in conflict resolution and how did that go? Or, you know, so these questions, or having these bullets in here, signals to the applicants the kinds of issues that we care about as a district and that we're likely to ask them about, even if it's not necessarily something they can demonstrate in that initial application. So I think it really sort of speaks to both sides, the applicants and the search committee.
Anyone else? All right, I think we're ready to depart this subject. And thank you to the SSS for all your work.
Thank you.
Jennifer,
I move to adjourn Union 26.
second. All right. So, all those in favor of adjournment of Union 26? I will do a roll call vote. Sarah Bass,
Sarah Bass, aye.
William, I.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Irv, aye. Katie,
Aye.
we're adjourned.
Okey-dokey. All right, so back to the region. You're up, Doug, superintendent's update.
Okay. A few topics for superintendent's update tonight. So a quick update on a finance director and trying to hire one. We did an interview today, so we'll just this afternoon, as a matter of fact, and so myself and other staff will be working through that and whether the candidacy is good and is something we want to move forward with or not. So we are in process in trying to find someone to help us out a little bit. Last evening, many of you went to the Town of Amherst Financial Indicators meeting. The Town of Amherst goes through its finances and has some standard metrics that they look at over a number of years that they're looking for trends in various categories of the financial health of the community, both in reserves and in tax burden and support from state aid, et cetera, et cetera. No real surprises there in that regard. I think that most of the trends are holding kind of steady as they have. State aid as a percentage of the budget has gone down over the last 10 years. So that puts pressure on, the community to use property tax to support, the budgets and, whether it be for schools or other things. New growth is helpful in that regard as far as keeping the Town of Amherst from needing to do an override, so there's not a projected override for the coming year. The real big takeaways to sort of start is that they're looking at right now, and of course their finance committee will get together and make formal recommendations regarding this, but they're looking at about a 3% increase for each of the operating budgets, so that would mean our regional school assessment would be 3% higher, and our Amherst Elementary budget would be that as well, just side note. The other thing that is sort of note in that was the current projection for health insurance. The increase in health insurance is looking like it's going to be about 12%. For the current year, it was just under 8%. Trends across the insurance industry, not just health insurance, are upward and pretty progressively so. But health insurance is one that is moving in a pretty strong direction that way. So that'll be a difficult task for us as part of the budget for fiscal '25. You may have known, and if you didn't, I'm going to tell you now, that there was a bit of a plumbing problem at the middle school today. So it was a damage to a pipe in the sprinkler system. If you're going to have a rather large flooding incident, the room in which it happened is probably the best room you could have it happen in. So it was in the sort of facilities end of the building. It was actually in a storage space that, you know, is not a classroom space in any way. It had an exterior door, so most of the water ran out the other direction it goes. It went down a drain. The problem was to actually solve the problem and get the repair done, which they were able to do today. Required us to shut off water to the building, which is why we had to close the building. We used Parent Square to reach out, although I don't think we had as much success with that as we had hoped, because you know, it's still new, and some aspects of sort of pushing alerts in a quick way are subtle from just general messages. Most of the messaging we've done and the folks that were doing the messaging have just done general messages. So those, when people sign up for Parent Square, they can just get a daily digest, and so they don't get messaged immediately. Some people have their settings set up so that it goes immediately. So they send a subsequent message after that. The fortunate thing is with middle school kids, it's not like they're 5 years old and suddenly standing on, you know, and we wouldn't do that anyway, but they're a little more capable of being on their own. But obviously for kids that have more intensive needs, you know, we were obviously going to be extra cautious if there was any circumstance where we were dropping those kids off to make sure that they have appropriate adult supervision, that sort of thing. The track and fields designer RFPs have been are in. We've been evaluating them a little bit. We're going to have interviews on Thursday with proposers to work through the selection of a design firm to do that work. So hopefully fairly soon we'll have completed the selection process and then be able to get underway with regard to that. And so the last thing I'll mention is that we have continued throughout the process of the Title IX and other investigative reports and have maintained that they are that they're personnel records and therefore not to be made public. There was a change in the law around, you know, personal records and public records. A couple of years ago, it's still you know, there's not a lot of case law around that, so we took a cautious approach and have been not making those public, you know, sort of based on, you know, sort of classic practice around personnel records. A challenge was submitted to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State has gotten back to us and suggested that with the exception of, you know, a specific outline of privacy concerns, largely most things are public records. And so we'll be, and I have been over the last couple of days, you know, redacting certain aspects of materials out of the 5 reports that we've received, and we'll be making those public to the particular petitioner, to the Secretary of State. They're technically due tomorrow, so we'll try to have those done tomorrow. I will send them to our council for the purposes of review. We could technically sort of challenge the ruling or provide additional information, you know, on advice of, you know, in reading through what the Secretary of State's office wrote, as well as consulting with our council. It would be a pretty subtle difference between what we, you know, might be able to put out and what we might be able to push back on and not make public. So I think it's most expedient for us to go ahead and prepare versions of these documents that can be made public. So we're going through and redacting student names, things like that, things where, you know, an individual's privacy is of importance to protect. And so we will very shortly be making those reports more publicly available than we have to date. So I think I'll stop there and see if anyone has questions about anything particular.
Just, oh, that's right. I'm
Outta
sorry.
here.
I'm sorry. I raised my hand.
Irv.
All right, so this is a fairly, well, it's not fairly. It is incredibly important what Doug just said. I don't know whether people are letting this soak into you. In the main, this particular investigative report and other reports related to it will become public. It will become public. The only redactions that I would recommend, and I've said this to Doug, is that the redactions are of students' names and witnesses. Everything else should be made public, to the public. This is one way in which we can begin to come to closure. When I say we begin, it's only a beginning, because we will still need to go through those reports to look at what the issues were, how those issues were dealt with, what errors or omissions were made, how we can then prepare not to have this happen again in the future, make our amends, apologize for those, and then move on to a better future. This is something that we need to do with great thought, great care, and we should do it as a matter of being transparent with our public, with the public. So those recommendations that I would be making is only the redactions that are going to be made are witnesses and students' names.
Jennifer.
So Doug, just to clarify, you said 5 reports, and so that's the 3 Title IX reports, and then there were 2 other personnel-related reports that Attorney Mitnick delivered to and does that include the report that the school committees received? So is it's 5 reports, or is it 6?
It's 5.
5.
So there's
So
2
three-
non-Title IX reports,
Uh-huh.
and there's 3 Title IX reports.
That's 5. Oh, and is the report we received one of
Is
the
one of those
non-title?
5.
Okay, so all 5 of those reports are going to be appropriately redacted, and you said made more publicly available, and you said would be given to the petitioner and the Secretary of State. Will we be getting them, and will they be publicly available?
I think anyone who's made a request, a public records request along these lines that maybe didn't petition the Secretary of State, we'll probably also send to them as well as a sort of matter of course. We'll do the petitioner first that specifically wrote to the Secretary of State, and then we'll subsequently, at that point, the other public records requests we would potentially satisfy with the same, set of documents, and so we'd probably share those as well.
Okay, so that you're going to send it to the petitioners, and how does anyone else, such as school committee members, get the reports?
It's a matter of public records request. So at that point, it's a public record, so it would be available to you if you wanted it.
Okay.
Just want to make,
Gabriella.
Did you just want to make a comment?
yes, I
on
want to
that?
make clear that these documents will be made public. And
How?
except for those redactions through the superintendent's office.
So I have a question about, so for example, there are documents that are public for which a person has to make a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request, and it takes months and that sort of thing. Is that the kind of made public that we're talking about, or is this going to be click on a website link and it's available, or something in between?
No, so the public records laws in Massachusetts are such that we have a public records officer. Once a request has been made, there's 10 days to respond in some form. Now, we don't necessarily have, generally within 10 days, we give the records to people if we have them. If it's a circumstance where it takes more than, I think it's 2 hours of work to put together, in other words, if it's not considered routine, then we have to put together essentially like an estimate of what it would cost to put that together. So the state in the Municipal Modernization Act put some boundaries on public records requests to not have, public officials be essentially harassed by folks with endless public records requests. And so they put some parameters on it, but it's essentially, and again, what I was saying before is anyone who made this similar request we have on file will probably, within a day or two of submitting these to the petitioner, likely send it to all of them as well. I think the other thing that we want to keep in mind in regard to this and sort of this redaction process is, and so I'll run this through our council as well, is that we're making our best judgment as far as the level of redaction that protects privacy as allowed by law and by guidance from the Secretary of State's office. That could be potentially challenged again if we over-redact and people say, no, that's not enough, I think there should be more, so that would go through that process again, but hopefully not. But we still have a certain liability risk in releasing this publicly. So if we're too cavalier with our redaction, in other words, we don't redact enough stuff, then we also, put ourselves at risk from that standpoint. So we're trying to, sort of strike that balance between guidance from the Secretary of State's office and protecting the district from unwanted liability risk.
Okay, thank you.
I think William and then Murph.
Can the school committee make a request to have those reports? And then if anyone does receive those reports, do they have the right to make it public on their own? Or is it just for their own reading?
That's a great question. I think as a public record,
They're public.
they're public at that point.
So
Public,
we could, as a school committee, then, like, I could say, I want to have a motion that the school committee files the paperwork to have it public to the school committee, and then we can decide if we legally can publish that, then we could.
I would suggest you don't have to be quite that formal
Okay.
as a school committee.
Yeah,
Okay.
here,
Feels like we do.
I would like to recommend that we do not put ourselves as a school committee in the position of letting someone else go out and make a public request, get the information and then publish it.
That's what's gonna happen.
Yes, so, what I have tried to say is that these documents are going to be made public. The only redactions, as I understand, is from our point of view in terms of protection, is the names of the students and names of witnesses. Secretary of State didn't say that. We are going to be saying that. So, to make it clear, we can do a vote this evening to make these reports public, to the public. We can have that vote this evening. I, for one, do not wish to wake up 2 days from now and have parts of it published in the Hampshire Gazette without us putting it out there first. And I'm sorry.
Amanda.
What, are you suggesting that the school committee, essentially, hey Doug, we want them, or do we have to send that directly to the public records request? And then you're suggesting that we post it on our website or make it, put it on our meeting agenda and say, here are the documents, they are now publicly available? Is that, because I think the question is, you say we're gonna make them publicly available, but exactly how are we going to make them publicly available? So that everybody understands, who's sitting here today, eating up these words, okay, when I do this, I will be able to see those documents. What is this?
Well, if you're asking me, this is if when we have those documents and we make them public,
How?
then we make them public via the means at our disposal, i.e. internet, email, or posted on our ARPS.
Okay.
Gabriella.
As a mechanism, I think it would make sense, since we're discussing this issue right now, to have them attached to the minutes of tonight's meeting as soon as we get them. Wouldn't that be one of the mechanisms that's available to us?
Katie?
It's just a point of order because I'm following this a little bit from afar. And so if I can get clarification as to, this is part of Doug's update, correct? Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just looking for clarification in terms of kind of how this conversation has evolved, and Irv just suggested that we could vote on it. So if someone could clarify for me what we're discussing and what the debate is, that would be helpful, because I've lost track of that.
So, this is in response to Doug's superintendent's update. However, I feel like given how much conversation we've had, maybe we should have this on our next meeting.
No, just after they get published.
28th, when you guys meet again.
Okay.
So, if I may.
Yes.
So I'm not sure we can attach it to the minutes because it would be, because it wasn't specifically identified as an agenda item. However, this is a topic that, essentially has come up with less than 48 hours. So there's no reason you couldn't take a vote. And if you chose to want to make it, available on the website or provide direction about how to disseminate this, I wouldn't generally suggest, emailing it to everybody. If for no other reason, they're really large documents and not everybody necessarily wants it, but if we just make it available, on the website, we can do that, or, if you have other ideas, you could take a vote to that extent and make that available, or request that we make it available.
Katie went on. She bleeped.
Katie?
If I can just clarify, when you're saying make this available, you're referring to the 5 reports, is that correct?
Yes.
That would be appropriately redacted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer?
So my initial question for Doug was, when you say make it available to the public, what does that mean? So if I'm a member of the public and I would like it, what do I have to do? Do I go to a website? Do I have to email? Do I have to make a formal public records request once these reports are redacted and sent to the petitioners? Then how does the public access them? So I feel like we're getting there by talking about posting it on a website. I think we could legitimately post them to the superintendent's update agenda item on board docs in tonight's meeting, and therefore they will be available to the public. And then we could notify our constituents about where to find them. The
So-
redacted 5 reports.
If I may, just any public records request goes to our public records request officer, which is Debbie Westmoreland. So anyone in the general public that would like a public record, whether it's this or anything else, makes that request directly to her. And, the sort of formality of law is it's 10 days to get a response. It'll be however quickly she can put that together. If you are to direct me as a school committee because these will be public documents, if you would like them then made public in other ways, you can do that. So so any individual can make a public records request. But if you want to be directive with it, you can do that and say, we would like it posted on the superintendent's update of the meeting of November 14th, or whatever other way you might want to direct me.
Okay. I think it was William's hand and then Tillman's hand.
Anna was before me, so I'll let Anna go.
I was just saying, there's a library on our website, the Board Docs website, that has materials. We could post it on the library. We can post it attached to the minutes. There's a number of different ways that I think we can, as long as we are clear about where it is and how people can find it, I think the exact mechanism is less important, but just has to be accessible and not require some fancy login.
Yes.
I was just going to mimic her. I think we should post it under the library and the board docs
Okay.
with a link on the webpage if we needed to clarify where it was.
Okay. What, a link on what?
Or just if we wanted to, on the main
On the main ARPS page?
correct.
Okay.
Like you could say, if you wanted to see them, you could search board docs from the library, kind of thing, just to inform people where it's at.
Okay. Tillman, did you have your?
I'm sorry, I'm hesitating to, I'm wondering if these reports should live on board docs where the school committee documents are, or if they should be on the website of the high school. It's not quite clear what the appropriate place is for those documents to live long term. Having said that, I do suggest that we should instruct Doug to make them available either right after the FOIA request was fulfilled or at the same time.
Are you making a motion?
Yes. Are you making a motion, Tillman?
I'm not sure yet where I want the docs to live, but let's say, okay, I move that the school committee instruct the interim superintendent to make these 5 reports publicly available at an appropriate location as soon as the FOIA request has been fulfilled.
Second.
Hold on, I'm trying to write it. You seconded, Jennifer?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Discussion. Gabriella?
I would like to suggest an amendment to the motion that says, rather than and make it public in an appropriate location, I would like it to say, make it public by putting it into the library section of the board docs website.
Jennifer?
I was going to make a similar friendly amendment, but just to say, post it on a public-facing website. I don't necessarily know if the library section's the right place, maybe. It's not used very much. But, sorry, but just lastly, on the one hand, I think we can, my one thought is maybe we can just allow Doug to decide the best location that's on a public-facing website. On the second hand, maybe we should provide some specific guidance as to where it should go.
Anna?
Can I make another friendly amendment?
Boy.
Just instead of FOIA, public records request?
Yes.
What'd she say?
That to just be a public records request, not a specific kind of request. Katie?
I would recommend, or maybe make an amendment to the motion to post them on the ARPS website directly. I think, personally speaking, I didn't know so much about board docs prior to stepping into this particular position. And then knowing that we will have candidates who are looking at our website, I think it's important to be as transparent as possible.
Irv and then Gabriella.
If I'm not mistaken, we do not have to go through a public document request as a school committee. We do not have to go through that. No. These are the documents of the district. These are the documents of this body. This body has the right to have access to those documents without going through a public records request. So that part of the motion, I think, needs to be removed.
So the part of the motion is just after the immediate things have been taken care of, then to put it to some public facing. Not that we are making a public records request, just once that
I
is.
just heard people saying, so I just want to make sure it's clear. The other thing is, what is the most accessible website that people can find this? And whatever that is, that's where it needs to be. People should not have to go hunting and pecking on their computer trying to find it.
Gabriella.
So I completely agree that the ARPS website is the most logical place where people will go to look, and it's the most accessible. However, as far as a place for it to live, Board Docs is designed to be an archival site. It's designed to maintain records, and it's going to be maintained over time in a certain way. So I would like to sort of incorporate the various suggestions that have been made, and that is that it live in Board Docs, because then it will be archived and maintained the way that all of the other legal documents associated with the school committee are, but that there be a prominent link available through the ARPS website.
Thank you. William?
I was just going to add that I know when we've been talking about the report bullying harassment piece up at the top menu on a desktop computer, if you're on your mobile phone, it doesn't come up. That top menu bar doesn't come up on a mobile phone. So I would say wherever we do place the link or place it on the Amherst Regional Pelham, the ARPS website, that it is below that first line. So then you can locate it on your cell phone also, because the staff directory, the news, that stuff is very hard to find on a mobile phone.
Okay, thank you.
News item. All right, can I revise my motion?
Absolutely.
And I offer that in replacement of all the friendly amendments. Okay, I'll try. So I move that the school committee directs the interim superintendent to make these 5 reports available as soon as possible and no later than they're released to anyone else in the public, by posting the reports in Board Doc and creating a, say, news item on the ARPS website linking to Board Docs.
Can I just read it back to you? A motion to direct the interim superintendent to make 5 reports available as soon as possible and not later than they are released to anyone in the public by posting the reports in Board Docs and creating a news item on the ARPS website linking to Board Docs.
A second.
I just wanted to confirm that was, yeah, good, okay, all right, thank you.
A second, don't you?
So, okay, so if that's an amended motion, then my second still, I second the amended motion.
I apologize.
You're keeping your second. This is our new amended, friendly amended motion. Still Jennifer seconding. Fantastic, okay. Also Jennifer.
So just, I understand, Tillman, what you're saying by not later than it's released to any member of the public, but like, it will be released to the petitioner first and then posted publicly, so it actually will be later than it was delivered to any member of the public, you know what I mean? Like, or are you saying like, I think that was the intention.
No 2 events in the universe take place at the same time, but, you know, at roughly the same time.
Oh, okay, just wanted to make sure.
All right.
Katie has her hand up.
Katie.
Thanks. Just to clarify, the as soon as possible, is there need to specify by a specific date?
Can I answer that?
Tillman?
Since I don't know what the process entails and since there seemed to be a review by legal counsel, I didn't want to specify a specific date. But I think Irv's point was, we don't want to be the second ones to find, or we don't want to be late in finding out.
So, we're required to have a response to the Secretary of State and the petitioner by tomorrow.
But your response could be, I can't do it.
Irv?
Yeah, it's my understanding that our attorney has indicated that redacting the names of students and the witnesses is something that we should do, but nothing else beyond that. Otherwise, if we go beyond that, then there could be other challenges to the Secretary of State. That's what my understanding is. Is that correct, Doug?
That is, I mean, we'll take the, we'll take the case history, precedents that have been set as guidance for how we're working on this. And of course, the materials provided when the Secretary of State responded to us about this as guidance as we do it. We may still be more, in the long story short, it may be more redacted than the petitioner is comfortable with. They can petition again if they choose to at that point, but we'll try to not have that be the circumstance because it just makes work for everybody to do that. But it's tricky to strike the right balance on how much privacy, and what particular things. I mean, there's clear guidelines about certain aspects of it. Others are a little more nuanced.
Jennifer?
So I just want to speak in favor of the motion. I'll be voting in favor of this. I think this is huge. I think this is a really big deal that the redacted reports, all 5 redacted reports are going to be made available to the public. I want to thank Doug and the district for not, I don't know, appealing or disputing the decision of the Secretary of State and for moving forward with making these reports public. Thank you.
William?
I just wanted to thank whoever in the public was that petitioned to have these reports made public and thank them.
So I think we are ready to vote on our motion, which was to direct the interim superintendent to make 5 reports available as soon as possible and not later than they are released to anyone in the public by posting the reports in board docs and creating a news item on the ARPS website linking to the board docs. All right. Katie?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Gabriella?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Hannah?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Tillman?
Aye.
And Roger?
Yes.
And Sarah Bass, yes. All right, so that motion passes unanimously. Yep, Jennifer.
I have a few more questions for Doug about his okay. So I'm going to ask my question that I've been asking, which is, Doug, have any terminations been completed due to the Title IX reports?
No, we're still in process.
Thank you. And now that we've had this, sorry, I'm going to keep going because I have a few more questions. Now that we've had this development of the redacted reports be available, Doug, I assume you're still working on your summary report of recommendations? And how's that going?
Well, needless to say, this is interrupted that, just because of the timing, the requirement of getting this completed. But I'd still, fully plan on continuing to work on it, because I think as far as what we need as a district and what I think you guys will want as well, but certainly us as a district, we need the sort of next step corrective actions, that sort of thing. And the particulars of the reports are not as essential to that, as far as a formal document that we can work with and move forward with, because people that come in the next, from now forward, they'll need to know what are our action steps, what are our policy procedures that we're going to do, not as much about the particular instances of who and what, but the resulting actions from that.
All right, I think Katie was next.
Just to follow up on Jennifer's question, is there an estimated date by which you think that would be done, Doug? Because I know now with the release of this information, people will be wanting to hear, and I'm wondering if there's a deadline in mind for that report.
As soon as I can get it done. There are a few other things that we're simultaneously trying to keep moving along. But nonetheless, I don't know. I mean, I was hoping to be further along than I am now, but at the same time, it's necessary for us to continue to move forward and to be taking actionable steps in a very, very short period of time. So I don't have a specific trajectory date other than as soon as I can possibly do it, but I don't want it to linger for any number of reasons. So I have a sense of urgency around it as well as you guys, but I'm just not sure. A couple hours this afternoon got taken up with some other things today, so that's sort of typical to things that kind of interfere with getting work done on this.
Is this a follow-up
And if-
question, Katie?
Yeah, I have a follow-up. If you could estimate like what % of it is done, what would you say, just to give us an idea?
I don't know, 25% at this point.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
About 25%, I would guess.
Thank you.
Irv?
I think that the most important thing to recognize and to realize is that when these reports are made public, this is Amherst. And believe me, everyone who goes through those reports will have 5 different opinions of what it is, and they all conflict with each other. But that's where we are. what I am afraid of is if we do not get out in front of this, we will be faced with an avalanche of questions in terms of interpretations, etc. I want us to be really proactive with this. As I said the last meeting, I have gone through those reports 2 times, and there are a number of areas in which I know that when any experienced eye looks at it, that there are areas that we were woefully short on the administrative, managerial, reporting mechanisms, etc. We were short. There were errors made. There were omissions made. And so I want those to come from us as soon as possible.
William?
Doug, do you have any update on the number of bully reports that have been filled out per campus and if they've been followed up on? I'd asked a few meetings ago, but I don't think we've ever really gone back to that.
I'm sorry, I haven't gone back and counted through them and done that. So I've forgotten to do the count on that. There's a fair number. It's a short story, which is not surprising. You know, you sort of advertise that we've got this form, and so people fill it out, which is what we want, right? If there are circumstances that need investigation, then obviously we're wanting to get that done. So I'm going to make a note to send a note to you all, to do that and get a note to you guys just via an email to tell you that.
Thank you. Anna?
So I just wanted to make sure that Doug was done with his report, but I just wanted to get a response to the emails that were sent about the volleyball team, and specifically, my question is, how was it scheduled for during the school year to resurface the floors while school was in session, and is there a reason that it was not scheduled for the summer?
So, to refinish the floors, so to broaden this out a little bit, so the main gymnasium here at the high school, as well as the one at the middle school, each year we do a resurfacing of the floors. It's not just a sort of strip and wax kind of thing, which we could do in-house. This is a particular specialized flooring and floor surfacing that gets done by professional organizations, and we don't have the in-house capacity to do it. We don't typically do it in the summertime for a number of reasons, but one of which, and I haven't verified this with the athletic director, but that volleyball in particular prefers it to be, so when you first do the floor, it's sort of super pristine and it's super sticky, and it's almost too much traction for volleyball. So they actually prefer to have it be at the end of its life cycle as opposed to the beginning of its life cycle. So that's part of why we have done it, and we have traditionally done it in and around this time of year for the last several years. The companies that do this type of work schedule well in advance. We scheduled this in August and was published out to athletic director and the schools. Obviously, I think there are ways in which we could communicate better about that, because I think some people forgot that those were on the schedule. We have traditionally tried to do it over the Thanksgiving break as opposed to a week earlier, but that's what was available from the vendors that we have, and so that's when it happened. And so the odds are, we took a chance that we may or may not have a volleyball team at this point in the playoffs, and we lost that bet. As a short story. It's unfortunate. There are other places and spaces we were able to take advantage of, and so we're appreciative of the folks at Frontier that allowed us to use their gym space. And it's unfortunate, but there was no, it wasn't like we woke up on Tuesday morning and said, oh, let's refinish the floors on Thursday. It's not like that whatsoever. It's a pretty involved process and pretty long time horizon on schedule. And really, it's a matter of continuing to do communication, and then also as we get into the season, into this part of the season, if we see that we're making that kind of progress, to start making those plans in anticipation, because it was on the schedule from August on. So there's a lot of people that own a piece of this in a lot of different ways, and that's not to lay blame on anybody, but just to say it's complex and you know, not intentional to against anybody or anyone in any way, but you know, it does speak to some need for a little better communication around some aspects of it, and therefore alters some of our planning.
Okay, Katie, did you ding in? Is that your hand up? No, just kidding. Okay, Irv.
Right. Doug, it'd be really important to put out to the public exactly what you just went through in relationship to the flooring, because you know, people have all kinds of assumptions about why a certain thing didn't happen. Even this really small thing, when small things become large things, the public, in terms of what the communication all of us got from my neighbor, that you know, is a big concern, and also they were putting it in terms of the context of a Title IX in relationship to women's sports versus male sports, and whether this would have occurred if it were a male sport. Well, it turns out it's a matter of a bidding process, and also when the thing could really be done. And those small things just need to be addressed. And I would appreciate it if you put this, your response, how you responded here tonight, back into a letter to those good folks who took the time out to write to us.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. One other thing I'll add is that if we were wanting to reschedule, we would have had to pay twice, essentially. We'd have to pay for this time that we did it, which we didn't do it, if we were to cancel. So we'd still have to pay. There's a cancellation fee, basically. And then when we'd likely be able to schedule it would be basically at the end of basketball season, or sort of March.
Anna?
So I think one of the things that was written to everybody was sort of a dissatisfaction with the response that was received when they complained about it. And so it was perceived as quite dismissive of their problem. And I think that sort of miscommunication gap, that communication gap needs to be addressed. And that, you know, it's one thing to say, we are so sorry that this happened. We will do everything in our power to prevent this from happening in the future. I'm really sorry we can't do anything about this now because this has been scheduled for months, and it would be way too expensive to reschedule it at this point. But what they heard was, well, the back gym's available, and that was not satisfactory. And so I think just, you know, crafting a slightly more sympathetic response would do measures to address the situation.
Okay. Oh, Gabriella?
I'd like to move to a different point of the superintendent's report. I just want to make sure that, okay. So you mentioned, Doug, that you've received the RFPs for the track and field work, and that you're going to be reviewing them. And one thing that I remember seeing when you first, several meetings ago, when we looked at some of the schematics that were options for the track and field, is that there was still a sort of decision to be made about the type of turf. And so I'd like to know if you can give us some, just a summary of what you were thinking at this point regarding the synthetic versus natural turf, and where that sits with respect to the weighing of the various RFPs that are in.
So the thing I'll say is this to start, and that is that we intentionally, in the RFP, because I think there are a number of open questions regarding the level of funding that we're going to have available, we left the the sort of response, and design options, open-ended on purpose, so that we can have that conversation again if we need to. And so I think that there is the debt authorization that's in place, which has very specific language in it. But the proposers, are bidding and offering their proposals, in a sense, independent of that. In other words, that our expectations that they will design sort of either option or all options, depending on sort of how things play out. So if we have greater clarity about finances or greater clarity about, aspects of it, then we'll provide them that direction. But I think that we're going to have to, and it'll come back to this body to sort of formalize the set of choices. So we're really trying to pick designers that can offer that series of choices to you guys, and we've got to weigh that with, what are the resources available and what's the best, options and under the resources we have.
And could you clarify, the debt authorization, you said has specific language. Does it have specific language about the type of turf? Can you clarify that for me?
It just says it says a synthetic surface, but not any more specifically than that. And so it does specify that. And if we were to do something other than that, we would then have to rescind that authorization and do a new authorization.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Now, there are funds available, so we can get, there are a number of funds that don't have those specifications around them, so we can proceed with design work and not run up against that constraint, because until we actually have to do that borrowing, which that language is, the formality of the language is dictated by the Department of Revenue. And, when we get to the place where we need to actually do that borrowing and use that authorization, then we'll have to have made a choice about it one way or the other.
Anna?
So I have a quick clarification. This is just the design proposal, and so did you say that we need to then vote to approve which design to have them do? Like once they've designed it, then we'll have a set of options about the different designs that they have produced and the different costs for each of those designs, and then do we come back and say, okay, we want you to do this design, or how does? I didn't understand that part.
No, the designs will be such that there may be a small amount of refinement that has to happen, but the lion's share of the sort of decision making will need to be made with most of the design options fairly well articulated. There may be, like I said, some refinement that needs to happen once your specific choices start to be made. But what's going to drive one thing that will definitely drive the choices will be how much money is available. And then if money's not an object, which it will be, but if it weren't, then there's a series of other criteria that we have to consider and think through. And that's part of why at the time, the previous school committee that voted the way they did, looking at those criteria, that's part of why they made the choice they made, was to their minds, given the criteria and understanding of the totality of what we need from a facility like this, they felt that was the best set of options available to us.
I think Katie
Oh,
chimed in.
yes, Katie, thank you.
Just curious about the time frame, and is this going to be an upcoming agenda item sooner rather than later?
In what sense? You mean as far as making a decision about the design?
Or reviewing, what is the role of the regional school committee in terms of taking the proposals and moving forward?
So the request for proposals, you won't, like I said, we're doing interviews with proposers Thursday. We'll do an evaluative process, in much the same way that the superintendent search subcommittee will be doing with their proposals. We'll select a designer at that point, and they'll start their work. There won't really be anything the school committee needs to do until they're much further along in their design process. So, and there's a host of things that they have to do that, independent of what surface that might be ultimately chosen or options provided. There's some other work around, the Tanbrook is culverted, right through the middle of that space, and so there's, investigations of that. There's gonna be, recommendations and constraints around that. There'll be, it's wetlands around there, so the Conservation Commission's involved, there's permitting involved. So there's a whole host of things like that that are gonna take place that the school committee is gonna not have to weigh in on for quite a while. But then once those designs get more developed and we get to the, get closer to making some choices for then construction to begin, that's when the school committee will be engaged at that point, I think. That's the best way to describe it.
I think Tillman and then Anna.
I think
I mean, Jennifer, sorry.
I think the question of what service it should be is really important to the community and to the committee. And I want to avoid that we're in a situation where we wait until all the reports are done and everything is ready to go for a particular solution. And then when we want to discuss this, the answer is, oh, well, we're already so far down the road. And the money has been authorized. Wouldn't it be more convenient to just go with one option that's already on the table? So I just want to make sure that we get a chance to provide input into the process as early as it makes sense from the design firm's side.
I'm sorry, Jennifer.
That's okay. Doug, I thought you said something just now about that it would come back to the school committee to look at the resources we have and make some decision. Did you say something like that? Like it's something that some decision would come back to us? Something about resources?
Yeah, so this is there's multiple, funding sources that we're trying to leverage, and we're gonna continue to seek, input from interested parties. And so those have, depending upon what constraints those people might put on it or not put on it, or exist already with the way in which those funds are granted to us by various bodies. I mean, Town of Amherst has voted some money, Town of Pelham's voted some money in their community preservation. I think that's where the resources are going to be limited. There's the hurricane boosters are doing fundraising as well. So there's a host of those different sources. That's what makes this much more complicated, and why, at some point to move the project forward, we're going to have to say, well, we can't do, we can't enter into contracts with anybody without the money to take those contracts on, right? So we can't commit to something if we don't have cash in hand at that point. So that's why I say that's where the decision points for the regional school committee are going to be, is if we're at a place where it's like, all right, we've got these couple of different, let's say 2, it may be 6, I don't know. There'll be, options that are available to us, and essentially different price tags for those. And then we're going to look at what, resources we have, and whether those resources come with any constraints or not. And then you'll make your choices based on that.
Okay, and you may have said this already, but like when-ish would that come to a head? And when-ish would that come to the committee?
I glanced at one of the proposers laid out a timeline, and now I'm trying to remember what it was. I can't remember. It's
like spring, winter?
No, it's probably 6 to 9 months from now, at least,
Okay.
if not longer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriella?
Related to that timeline question, you mentioned that if the regional school committee decided it wanted to change the language that's in the debt authorization, it would have to rescind the debt authorization and then create a new one. I'm assuming that takes some amount of time, and connecting to Tillman's point about we don't want to be sort of finding ourselves up against a deadline. If that process takes some amount of time, we would want to plan our conversations about it far enough out that we're not running up against, okay, they want to start putting turf down of some kind tomorrow or next month. How long does that rescinding a debt authorization and creating a new one, how long does that take?
Rescinding a debt authorization doesn't take long at all. It's easy to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's harder to get into it. So if you do a debt authorization, and you could do it at any time, we typically, out of courtesy to the member towns, particularly the ones that have town meeting, typically only once a year, we try to line it up with their annual town meeting. The reason for that is because you guys do a debt authorization, we have a formal notice that we send to each of the town's select boards. They have 60 days to take action or not take action. If they decide, if they take no action, it's essentially a pocket approval as opposed to a pocket veto, so it's a pocket approval. If they wanted to, take a broader vote on it or to, vote it down, then it has to go to town meeting. And so they have to call a town meeting, so we don't typically want to force the community into a special town meeting unless they're already having one, which the smaller towns don't always have off-cycle town meetings. They do sometimes. Some things come up, but it's difficult. So we tend to try to match it up with the spring town meeting. So it's probably not this spring. I think that'd be a little early. Probably the following spring that we would do that. And again, I think, there's a number of variables. If there are other resources that, if suddenly, I don't know, Keith wins the lottery and wants to buy a field and a track, and so there's this huge donation, then it's a different conversation, because we don't,
Yeah,
that could change it.
so it's a cycling issue with the town meetings.
Yeah.
That's very informative, thank you.
Irv.
Yeah, this whole thing, and Doug states it brilliantly and sometimes opaquely, but this is Doug. It went in the final analysis of this, it is going to come down to the availability of money. And part of that money has been raised, part of it needs to be raised, part of it comes with conditions that are there. And all of that has to be worked out through this entire process. And so this is probably one of the more complex financial issues or problems to accompany a project that I've ever seen, because there are so many financial moving parts to it. But it is not easy, and Doug does a great job of explaining something that's really complex.
Katie?
Can I just get clarification again on, as to when the proposals are due and the time frame by which the project should be started? I'm a little bit confused in terms of whether we're waiting to see what the funding available is, or if we're making a decision based on where we are at financially now.
So the proposals were due, now I've got to remember, I want to say November 1st. So the proposals are in, as far as the design.
And how many are in?
So there are 2 proposals that we're reviewing.
Okay.
Both seem to have all the sort of component pieces. So one of the first things you do is you just go through and make sure that they gave you all the things that you asked for in the proposal. It seems as though both are qualified in that regard. We felt we wanted more information from them, and so they're going to do presentations for us this Thursday. We have only looked at what's called the non-price proposal. So there's a non-price proposal and a price proposal. We have not opened the price proposals yet. We wanted to go through the non-price aspect of it first, because it's a qualified process, so it's not exclusively on price. If we did a request for bid, it would be lowest bidder and you're done, it's a quick thing. That's not the circumstance, so we wanted to apply some qualifications. So once that decision's made about which one of those 2, presuming we're comfortable with them, then it'll be, essentially, we'll put a contract together. Those are, standard in form, but lengthy, so there might be, some back and forth over a few days or weeks to get that tidied up. We'll sign those contracts. They'll begin work. And then they'll begin that work, and that will take quite some time. That's why I was saying sort of, 6 to 9 months at least to kind of get to design, to a level of sophistication and detail that would require action by school committee to start sorting through what are our resources that we have available, what are the things that we want to formalize into the project or not into the project at that point. Did that help?
If there's just 2 proposals, the decision is like one or the other, correct? There's no room for other.
Well, the other option would be to have a failed RFP process and we have to start over. In other words, if we interview these 2 companies and we don't think they can deliver what we need them to, I kind of think that's doubtful, but
Yeah.
we'll see what they do for us on Thursday. If they, we could technically go, these aren't the right companies, we're gonna have to do this again. That will be fairly quick to do that again, but I'm hoping that's not
And
the
that-
case.
Yeah, and that just leads me to my other question, which is like, what is the timeline for completion of this project?
So that's why I was saying I glanced at those within their proposal. I haven't looked at it more closely, but that's why I say it's at least, 6 to 9 months, maybe longer. I just don't remember. I'll have to look. It takes a while to go through all these things. And there are aspects of it that involve, permitting and meeting, like the Conservation Commission. So, they only meet like once a month. So you've got to kind of hit their cycle and have right documents put together for that purpose, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's some aspects of this that just, independent of, even if we knew today exactly what we wanted, there's a certain time horizon just because of the I'll say bureaucracy, not in a negative way, but just the nature of the process that allows for these different, components of town government to weigh in and exact their authority the way they should.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we need to move on. So next is chair's update. All right.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah.
I'd like to move to extend the meeting for 30 minutes.
We're not doing
Do we have to do 2.5 hours, or do we have 2 hours?
it. 2.5.
2.5. Oh, good. Okay, never mind. Just kidding.
We're not.
We've got 20 minutes.
Okay, so my only chair's update is I had been reached out by, we talked before about the policy subcommittee looking into the reports and how that could all work, and I reached out to the council regarding that, and they strongly recommend against that as for the RSE to vote to recommend any administrative actions, as it's not under our purview, and it would undermine the authority of the superintendent's building authority and building principles.
What are you talking about?
We weren't, so the policy committee would not make administrative procedural moves. They would recommend policies and policy changes based on the findings from the report, not
That's legitimate.
procedures.
That's legitimate.
Yes, it was more about reading the reports and then making administrative.
We wouldn't
No.
make administrative
Okay.
things, we would make policy.
We're making
Correct.
policy things,
Yes.
then great.
It was to get the reports to then be able to use them to form new policies.
And
Or
it's a
change
little bit
policies.
moot now
Yeah.
because we can
Yep.
get them.
Okay, so moving on.
Moving on.
Any school committee announcements? Jennifer?
I just wanted to share that the girls varsity volleyball team made the Final Four in the state championships, and they played in the semifinals yesterday. And unfortunately, they didn't advance past that, but they did a great job. They played with a lot of heart and grit, and we're really grateful to Coach Casey coaching team for a great season for girls varsity volleyball.
Yes, thank you very much. They did have a great season, and they played well last night. It was a really hard-fought game. And they played phenomenally all season. Okay. Tillman?
Sorry, I had a question to the chairs from the previous point, but can I ask a question as part of my announcement?
Sure.
Are the chairs planning on making any statement when the reports will be released as to something along the lines of, the reports are available now, we're reviewing how we can adapt policies and, help avoid similar situations in the future?
Take it under advisement.
Except for that last part, told me you were on.
Any other school committee announcements? Okay. Katie?
I'll keep it very brief, but this would be the time where I can share. I met with the MPAC, which is the Multilingual Parent Advisory Council, last Wednesday. I'll talk more about that in the Amherst School Committee meeting, but long story short, there is a job opening through School Spring for the coordinator, essentially the parent guardian liaison with the district. So perhaps I can pass that along to share in the minutes or get it publicized somehow, the link to that particular position. But the person who serves in that position now is essentially been in that position for longer than she would like, so
Okay.
thanks.
Okay. So, next matter of business is update on the district-wide professional development.
So we have here tonight Marta Guevara and Mary Kiley to kind of walk us through a little bit of that. So I'm going to leave it to them to take you through, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you both so much for staying and waiting.
Happy to be here, thank you. So I'm Marta Guevara, I'm Director of Student and Family Engagement. I oversee the Family Center, and I have a lot of other compliance work that I do for the district.
I'm Mary Kiley, I'm the Curriculum Administrator for the districts. We're starting? Yeah. So we've come here tonight to give you a brief update on the LGBTQIA plus trainings that have been offered to all staff during this school year. The first one was on convocation. We only have a few opportunities, honestly, during the year to gather all staff together to train. One was convocation. So this year we decided, instead of having the traditional activities that we usually do, we decided to do a 90-minute training for all staff. The same training was offered in 5 different locations. And the thinking behind that was that it would be a baseline training so that everyone would have the same exposure and the same training to begin with, and that we would differentiate as we went along. This training was offered by Safe Schools, and also the UMass Stonewall Center was involved. Do you want to talk some about Safe Schools?
Yeah, when things happened last year, and we were looking for just moving forward and where to go, and we had our own internal expertise, but we reached out immediately to the Stonewall Center, and Ginny, who is pretty amazing, Brimmen, and I was we're very familiar with their work, particularly with the transgender aspect, and they were incredibly helpful, and they were generous with their time. So in that initial conversation, we heard that they were the point person in the region also for Safe Schools, which was a little bit under the weather. It's now revamped. And also, they would be the contact. And so that's where we went. And so we, along with Safe Schools, which is really, I want to make sure I say it correctly here, but it's a collaborative effort between DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQIA Youth. And so they, along with very great trainers, helped us through this. It was the initial one. We didn't want to make any assumptions. I know that we want to make sure, just like we're teachers first, right? And so we can't evaluate or we can't hold people accountable if we don't teach what we think we should all know. So that was that day. And it was pretty successful. We had them in all schools. Pelham came to Fort River, and Summit Academy came to the high school. It was very successful. We had great feedback from it.
We'll do next slide. So we're not going to read through all of these, but these were the goals for the training. And as Marta said, we were trying to set a baseline. And Safe Schools was very explicit about not assuming. They knew that people would come with different levels of knowledge and experience, and so they were not assuming that people were starting from a particular place. And it was really a very welcoming space. The administrators were all in different buildings, and I felt that it really did create a climate where people could ask questions and could come from where they were, and go from there. So one thing that did come out of that, people were saying, staff members were sharing that they would like to hear from kids. And so that, we can move to the next slide, that got incorporated into the next training, which was just last week in our all-district curriculum day. And we decided not to bring art students on this particular occasion, but we did want to really bring those student voices forward. And so in lieu of a keynote, we turned the student panel into a keynote. And so 4 students from Translate Gender's Trans Youth Action group came to speak to us, and we can move the slide. They were fabulous, yeah.
Yeah, so we had, there was a larger committee, obviously. We're not all here, but Maureen Fleming was part of that, Debbie Westmoreland, Jadida, and anybody else? It was us, yeah. And it was great. We made a decision not to have our own kids. It was important that for this first session that we were having everybody be there, and we had heard from some parents as well and caregivers that it would be important not to do that. However, we have a very amazing saga group at the high school. We have some long-standing groups, which we'll see next, that they're amazing, and we will hear from them when we talk about next steps. What else did we want to say about that?
I just wanted to really give those students credit. They were asked some very direct questions by 2 facilitators, and it was really poignant. Their honesty and their thoughtfulness. They were asked things about their dreams and their senses of themselves and what had been helpful or hurtful to them in schools and what advice they would give to adults. And I think that really resonated and spoke very deeply to people.
Yeah, but we want, and of course, students, that's who we want first. And so, should we go to the next one?
Sure, so that was followed by 6 different workshops. And for this staff, most people were allowed to choose which workshop they wanted to do because we'd done that more general training in August. And so now we wanted to give people an opportunity to delve more deeply into particular aspects. And all teachers, all Unit A staff were required to attend. Paraeducators were invited to attend. They were not required to. And as I said, most people were allowed to choose. We did make a recommendation that some of our facilities colleagues, including custodial services and transportation, along with our food services colleagues, attend the first panel. That was felt to be the most appropriate one, and that was all things non-binary.
Yeah, and we had almost 100 people there, and they were in person, and we had some other folks supporting them, so that was great. And you can read the names of the presenters. I mean, we won't go, but we have some amazing people. So the director of Safe Schools is one of them, Jason Wheeler, and we've had James, and so we had a great presentation. We will get the feedback, and we'll be able to share, because there were some reflections, and I think half of the people, which was, I think, a pretty good return rate, have completed a reflection about it. And then the next slide is just kind of for next steps. As I mentioned, Maureen Fleming is having a parent caregiver group. I think you're in it. It's about 25 members. They do it twice. They will be meeting one in the morning, during the day, and an evening one every month. And she's also meeting individually with students. They're trying to assess together, kind of like a needs assessment. It's very difficult to create a group, so she's had a lot of interviews and spent a lot of time with a lot of the high school kids and a couple of the middle school students. And so we're excited about that piece.
Yeah, and so each school, so now we're getting down to the school level, and each school is in a slightly different place. So central office is going to serve as a kind of clearinghouse to help building leaders identify what their appropriate next steps would be. And student organizations are also involved at the secondary level. So that would be like POSH and SAGA. And finally, there's an AEF grant that the school nurse from the middle school obtained, which was wonderful to work on education about sexual harassment. And that's going to involve the armed student organization, POSH. So there are many things going on.
And it's going to have a parent caregiver component, and it's also going to have a staff component. So we're hoping to gather all of this information and put it all into, you know, a bigger plan, but clearly the first step was listening. We wanted to listen from people, you know. So that was just real quick, but I'm sure you may have some questions. So we'll come back with more information. Maureen couldn't be here, but hopefully she can come and you can hear from her. She's doing great work.
Katie.
First of all, thank you so much for coming and sitting through like 2 hours as is already in this meeting. But this really is, I think, the first view we've gotten and the public has gotten in terms of the actions that are being taken. So thank you so much. I do have a question, and it's wonderful to see in the slides like the specific outputs, the number of teachers, you know, who attended the different workshops, the groups that are being formed. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the outcomes in terms of how will you know when this professional development work has been accomplished? What is the change you're looking to see, and what are the indicators to measure that?
We're not there yet, obviously. I mean, that's the work we know we have to do, and we're just being honest. You know, we've been here, I mean, I start work at 7, and we haven't had a break. No, and the reason I'm sharing that is that we are we know what we have to do. We owe it to our students, number one. We owe it to our families. The reality is that our students, we have to work for them. And I don't want to talk about last year because it's just too much. I'm the Title IX coordinator as well, so I'll just leave it at that. But we will have a comprehensive plan. I'm not ready to tell you that, but we're very versed in SMART goals, and so we will be bringing that forward at some point.
Thank you so much. And I think that's where these well, you have access to the reports, but the reports, you know, will only inform and help define those. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Gabriella?
I also want to thank you and everybody who was involved in putting these trainings together and pulling them off, which I know is a huge amount of work. And also want to underscore my colleagues' comments that, yeah, this is a concrete action. It shows a response, a real response that happened early in the academic year and has continued with respect to, you know, responding to some of the challenges that came up last year. And I also wanted to say that I've been involved in a lot of DEI work of various kinds at my own place of work at UMass Amherst, both as a trainer, helping faculty understand how to use curriculum in an inclusive way, but also as a student, as a learner. And one of the things that I think is absolutely true about changing culture with respect to DEI issues of any kind is that it's an ongoing lesson. And so I want to both support and encourage and hope that everybody in the community understands that, you know, it's not going to be a one time and everything gets fixed, but that hopefully as you move into the future, and some of these next steps are a great start, that as you move into the future, it becomes something that staff and teachers and students begin to expect as something that is a regular part of the conversation, because it just can never change with one or a few instances. And so I applaud the beginning and encourage a continuation.
Thank you. I will count on your expertise as well. But I think it's important for people to know that according to Jason and a few other people, not many districts have had this commitment to have their entire staff right now on 2 occasions, be able to learn together. Because I know there was all kinds of thoughts about, you know, the extent of the training. We have phenomenal staff, we have phenomenal teachers, but, you know, we didn't have a common ground. So like we said, we wanted to make sure that everybody had the same understanding. And we had, those breakout sessions were pretty amazing. But it's a beginning again. And I think the focus of our work is always students, obviously. And we have a lot to do and we have a lot to learn. But we're not gonna be satisfied until everybody feels respected, accepted, welcomed, as if they belong. That is really our commitment.
Just if I can add a couple of quick things. So one sort of, you'll notice on one of the slides it had a sort of head count at each of the sessions, but I will say that that's an undercount because there are a lot of people that sat together, especially that first section, we had groups of folks that would sit 5 or 6 together. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons, because I think any kind of training like this, it's always an ongoing process. So I think we're trying to realign ourselves with our values. I think that Amherst has and continues to have, Amherst and the other 3 communities that are part of the regional school district have always had you know, real commitment to these kind of values. I think what we're doing is trying to realign ourselves with those values and reinvigorate our processes and reintroduce you know, topics to folks in new and subtle ways. I think there's always going to be an ongoing conversation because the nature of the issues evolve and change over time, and so you're always having to adapt and grow and strengthen and reinforce as you go along. And so I think one of the great things about being able to do district-wide PD like this, and this is true in, you know, in the last couple of years on our November date, we've taken some other stuff, some other topics in this same sort of way, is it fosters conversations, and so it allows for people to have you know, deep and meaningful conversations sort of in and around this. So one of the things I said, you know, we got some requests, oh, can we watch 2? And I said, you know, we made the decision collectively to just sort of be kind of a closed circumstance, because I wanted folks to feel comfortable if they needed to express themselves in ways that might be a little awkward or uneven because of where they are in their journey and sort of understanding. And so we wanted to have that and have people feel comfortable that then they can continue those conversations outside of the formal sessions, whether it be that day or any other day. And so we're trying to, you know, promote that environment amongst our staff, that it's, you know, we're learners too, and it's important to continue to learn and continue to grow in so many different ways. And so we want to kind of reinforce that culture that we've tried to have in years past and want to reattune ourselves to.
So I spent some time in each of the sessions because I really wanted to capture, and people were very vulnerable. People were very willing to share, I mean, some of their concerns, their thoughts. They had a lot of questions. So, and I think students and presenters were very impressed by the level, not only of respect, of course, and support, but of, you know, the questions and their vulnerability. And I just want to praise our educators for that, because that's, you know, that's not easy to achieve.
Anna?
So I was just wondering, you know, I've talked to a lot of parents who, you know, they're all over the spectrum on their views on this, and I was wondering if part of this training touches on interacting with parents and how you respond to parents who may be on one side of the spectrum, who may, like, for example, I talked to one particular parent who was just very adamant that keeping parents out of the loop, you know that a student is transgender or has told their friends that they're transgender, and they are not telling the parents that this information, that this is, you know, a violation of parental rights and all of these things. And, you know, like that kids are, even in this age group, are too young to really know. And like, how do you advise teachers in how they communicate with those parents?
I'll just, and then you can. No, I think the way we've always approached it is, well, they're part of our school community. In our school community, these are our beliefs, and this is the way we will deal with those situations. So it's not the case that anything goes. I do know, I mean, I think, but there's an education process, and I think there's a dialogue that needs to happen, and certainly it involves families, but yeah. Did you want to?
Well, you know, in working with families, of course, it's respect and it's validation, it's understanding where people are, but it is the case that we stand, right? We stand for some things. I mean, we are, our public schools, number one, respect, and respecting differences, et cetera, right? And it's important. We've had quite a lot of challenges in terms of people questioning, you know, for example, in my religion, this is not allowed, or from my country, this is not allowed. I mean, diversity is, you know, all kinds of views, but at the same time, we say the reality is that we're a public school. We have, you know, we believe that we have to respect, et cetera, and then all of the curriculum, along with our school climate, along with all of these initiatives are intertwined, the intersectionality. So it's who we are. So it's tricky, but at the same time, we have to address each family with the care and respect they deserve. But it's very difficult at times, yes.
Roger?
Yeah, one of the things that you've done, and in looking at your workshop options, and having been through 38 years of going to PDs, you start off with identifying folks in a way that so people can see them. And then specifically, you can find curriculum resources to help to include, to help to inform, and then you have engagement with the family, so you've gone beyond the school community or outside what happens out there. And then you go back to school and you navigate microaggressions and macroaggressions. But my favorite part is number 5.
Yes.
Number 5, for the things that the adults may or may not see, that students can take leadership in.
And you were an expert in that. I can attest to that. I just want to say.
This is not about me.
No,
This
no,
is real. No,
think-
wait, let me
yes.
finish. This is a really excellent plan because it weaves. It's not standalone plaids or something. It actually weaves all of this stuff together, and I can see it. So thank you. That's all I want to say.
No, thank you. I think it was great. For example, the micro and macro aggressions gave specific strategies that were pretty amazing. I just need to tell you. So they had a chance to practice, and they got more information, and they have support. Their list of resources, which of course we could share with you, is incredible. So at their fingertips, they have an array of resources, not only for curriculum, but that is pretty amazing. So that's all thanks to this group that has been pretty amazing. I just also want to say, in terms of the fiscal piece, this is only costing us $250. I want to say that because it's our intern superintendent and finance director. I just want to commend. So Safe Schools, the trans group, the commission, and the Stonewall Center, they've all been incredibly generous. And so I just want to say that. It takes a community, and we came together. And it's not about money, right? But I just wanted to say that as well.
William?
I just wanted to thank you for everything y'all are doing, first off. And I also, everything was great. Just having a child in the high school, knowing that they have advisory in the plus periods, is there something that we can start taking to the kids in that arena as far as curriculum or activities to create an environment or a culture that's more accepting of differences
It is
than what we
happening
currently
in
have?
some
Okay.
areas. I think that the high school should speak about the flex block and their vision and all of this. But certainly we've tried different things. We've had advisories as well. But anything else? I agree with you.
Because
I
my
mean,
personal
it's-
child hasn't seen anything, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
No, no,
Because
no.
she only has one little lens, right?
I agree
So
with
that
you.
doesn't mean it's not there, but it would be nice to know
Missed opportunities.
next
and-
steps, like how that is next steps.
At the middle school, for example, we did several sessions, we did some advisories, we also had an assembly. I'm not saying this is an
Right.
answer, I'm just,
No,
I'm just talking about some of the things that we've been doing, and more of that, along with our restorative justice coordinators. There's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot more we can do. I agree.
But I think it has to happen in each building as well. And then I
Right.
think it will look different in each
Yeah,
building.
agreed.
Yeah, and I think that really is the next step to dig more deeply into what's possible in each building. For example, the elementary schools, they're looking at their sexuality identity curricula, and
Right.
it's different in different buildings.
I think Crocker had a great program, I
Yeah,
heard.
we have two programs.
Okay.
So we have Pelham, and then we have Crockers, and they're sharing. So at Wildwood, they're working on this hybrid, and so the reality is that we need more of it. But people are committed, and each of the principals with their staff are outlining where their building needs more, to further study and to dig deeper, and so.
Thank you.
Miguel?
Yeah, so, excuse me. So before we wrap up, I think it's necessary to, on behalf of the student body, to express my gratitude for not only the commitment to our well-being, but like the quality of the work that you're presenting here. And I also want to underline the importance of feeling supported by our teachers and administrators, and your role in facilitating that through these trainings. I just want to put it out there that it's really appreciated.
Thank you. You're wonderful. Thank you. And we appreciate it. We're doing it for you, and so hearing that means a lot. Thank you.
I like that.
Excellent. I just want to say thank you both so much for all of this and all of your future plans, and for coming and staying for forever tonight. So,
And we want to come
Thank you so
back.
much.
We want to come back with more data, but we want to come back with a lot of the great things that are happening, that are
Perfect.
coming out of the family center, coming out of curriculum. We have so many good news to share, so we'd love to come back.
let me know when.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Point of order,
I heard a point of order.
2.5 hours have passed.
Okay, so I will make a motion, we extend our regional school committee meeting by 30 minutes.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Nope. All right. Katie?
Do you approve?
I had no comment.
No.
Oh, no, I know, I'm
Are we
asking you
voting?
about, yeah.
Okay, yeah, aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Anna?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Tillman?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
And Sarah Beth, aye. We are extended by 30 minutes.
And is that 30 minutes from now or from the 2.5 hour mark? Just wondering.
From now.
May I make another point of order? Could we take a 5-minute break?
Yes, and our 30 minutes will stop after the 5-minute break.
That's not what I voted on.
When you speak in class, does everybody listen?
So I think one of the points that was made in goal number 2 in particular was a little more, detail about what engaging municipal leaders was like. So, additional 4 towns meetings and written communications to promote common understandings and multiple perspectives of school spending. So traditionally, we'll have at least 1 4-town meeting, sometimes 2. I'm guessing this year we'll probably have at least 2, if not 3. So just so you know this, so the first 4 towns meeting is typically in early December, where we take a sort of very first broad brush of budget. Probably the 9th or 16th, we're kind of posing the question to see if there's any sort of major event at any one of the communities on either of those. Personally, I'm leaning for the 16th, not for any other reason than it's just further away from today than the 9th is. And it just gives a better opportunity to do, better first cut through things. So it's entirely likely we'll need to do some additional work as we go through the difficult budget season. So just tried to add a little more detail to that one to speak more specifically about how that engagement was going to happen. The rest of them I left pretty much as is. I will say that I spoke with the Pelham School Committee last week. The advice I gave them was, if you adopt the goals in this form, obviously some of them are clearly not appropriate for, kindergarten through 6th grade. And so those don't apply. And so I think that's fine. I'll give the same advice to the regional school committee. If it says something about kindergarten or pre-K to 6th grade, it's that's obviously a bullet point that has no meaning for review for the regional school committee. So I'd offer that as well. And that way you don't have to sort of parse them apart too much in that regard. But I'm happy to answer any questions people have or any other additional thoughts people have relative to these. And they're in 1 through 4, and I would also say, we didn't talk about this last time so much, but it's like in no particular order. So so it's not that 1 is more important than 2, than 3, than 4. They're just that was the numbers in which I put them on the page is all. You gave some indication last time about things that you felt had a little more urgency than others, and so that's part of it. I'll take that advice. I don't think it have to be formalized in a statement of the goals as to that. But appreciate feedback or any other feedback you guys have relative to these or other edits you may want to make.
William?
I just have one comment on goal number 1. Let me see what bullet it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th bullet says modify the online bullying reporting system. I would still like to see that data would be collected on number of bully reports turned in that as part of your goal to keep track of that data.
So I'll tell you, I got a text from Faye Brady, because she watches these meetings from home, and she actually compiled numbers of reports and where they're set in process and that sort of thing. So I should have that to you tomorrow through today. So I'll double check with her before I send it to you, just to make sure I'm understanding what's there and can provide you proper context. But nonetheless, I can include that.
And I guess only other comment, we heard great things today with the numbers of staff that were going to the November 7th, how the number of staff that went to each group. But I guess percent of staff that have been trained for the first bullet by the end of the year?
First bullet under goal 1?
Under goal 1, sorry. Just as staff changes or it flexes, is it 95% of staff has been trained on that?
Yeah, we can put those stats together. I mean, the goal is that, anybody that wasn't able to make it for whatever reason, that we have recordings of those and are trying to share those out. But again, we need to execute on that to make sure everybody gets it. So, yeah.
That's all. Perfect.
Thank you, William. Anything else? No. Yeah, Gabrielle?
I'd like to move to accept these goals with the modifications suggested.
Second.
Roger.
Roger? All right. Any further discussion? All right. Roger?
Aye.
Tillman?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Anna?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Katie?
Aye.
And Sarah Bass? Aye. Excellent.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you all.
Nice and fast. All right. The enrollment reports?
Yeah, so every October, we're required by state law to, well, actually 3 times a year, but particularly in October, the numbers are counted and are part and parcel of the enrollment numbers that are used by the state to do Chapter 70 funding and a whole host of other things, and also get reported at the federal level. We actually also report the student counts in March and at the end of the year. And so here's some quick statistics on where our enrollment was. You know, in the middle school, we have 370 students, down just 2 from last year. At the high school, we have 841, down 17 from a year ago. That's actually sort of bodies in the building. The total number of kids we have that we have responsibility for is different from that. This is more who's actually in the building specifically. You know, as far as team sizes, you know, we try to balance them out. We've got 2 teams at both 7th and 8th grade level, so we've got 95 and 93 in the 7th grade. We've got 91 in each of the teams in the 8th grade. And of course, you know, if we were to do a head count today, it's probably slightly different by plus or minus a few kids. So just to be aware that this was as of October 1st. I'll show the courses report for the high school, sort of what the class sizes look like and some of that in just a second on a different slide. But one of the things we often report in this is just, you know, the number of courses that weren't offered just due to low enrollment. So that, you know, they just couldn't offer a section because it had such low numbers. And so there were 4 that they had in the catalog, but then didn't, you know, have enough kids sign up to sort of merit a section of it, and so they're in other things.
I noticed that Bible and related literature was on this list, but in the enrollment spreadsheet, it has 13 kids enrolled, so I was just...
Maybe a second section, they couldn't offer a second section.
Oh, okay.
Or it could be, and I haven't looked specifically as to whether it was offered in the fall semester, not the spring semester, you know, that kind of thing. So it's sometimes when they're on this list, it's not that they may not be offered at all, it's just they may not be offered like both semesters, or, so it limits who can take it when it's not offered that way.
I also saw one class that had 2 kids in it.
Yeah, so I have some story about that.
Okay, sorry.
Not fictional story. So let me bring that other one up for a second. So there's a couple things to keep in mind relative to looking at these sort of class sizes and section sizes. So one of the things, and I think I'll, if I can find it here really quickly, I'm going to slide down to the foreign language or the world languages.
If you could give a page number, that would be really helpful.
So you'll see, you know, notice how you see, like, and world languages is pretty helpful here, and this is about the 5th page of 14. You'll notice that, you know, say Chinese 1 and H, so that means and honors, they co-teach those in the same class period. But you'll also notice Chinese 5 and AP, so there may only be, if you were to separate out the AP from the Chinese 5, you know, it might be 4 in each, or 5 in one and 3 in the other. So they do some stacking of people in the rooms to be somewhat efficient as best they can to do that. A parallel is sometimes you see in the elementary, in really small schools like grade 1, 2, kind of thing, so it's kind of a parallel there. The other thing I'll point out, and I think it's, let's see if I can find the section where it is, you know, it sort of shifts the class size conversation a little bit, is when we get into some of the, let's see if I can find it, some of the intervention type work and classes, and I may not be able to find it here. Yeah, some of these intervention type sections and classes often are by design smaller because of the kind of work we're trying to do with students in and around building some skills and augmenting and doing that kind of thing. So sometimes if you were to sort of go to the bottom of the report, you sort of look at the overall class size, you're like, wow, it's really low. And it's true, and You know, you also, as you scan through this document, you'll see class sizes, you know, usually in things like Hurricane Singer's got more than 30 people in it. Well, yeah, the whole chorus sings together, right? And so that's logical, you know, orchestra's got a big group of people. But there are some others that, you know, that aren't too small. But when you see really small ones, sometimes it's really an artifact of you know, either a class that just has a narrower band of kids that are interested in it, or it, you know, like I was saying, is sometimes when we're doing some of that kind of intervention and support work for kids and augmentative work, those class sizes are by design and with intention made much smaller. It tends to drive the average class size down. So I did want to point that out as a caveat. And it's not always immediately obvious when you look through these that that's the case. So just, you know, I think it's fairly on par with what has been the case in previous years, but I'm open to answering questions if I can.
Specifically computer programming in Java, which I'm glad you're offering, but there's only 2 kids in it.
Yeah, that's probably, let me see if I can find that in the chart here.
Yeah, sorry. It's like, wow.
Yeah, it's, I can almost guarantee that's one of those that's, shot by it, sorry. Make people nauseous if they're watching on TV by me scrolling. A motion sickness thing. What I'll say is this, you know, that's typically, you know, like we're talking about with the foreign language, will sometimes stack classes together. They often teach those programming languages. If they have small enrollment, they'll stack them up and kind of co-teach, not co-teach, but
During the other classes?
co-offer the classes, so that it's not too small. We get a little more bang for our buck.
Tillman?
So Doug, you know that I'm a proponent for math, and I'm looking at the number of course sections that it has here, and your goal 4 bullet 1 says looking at opportunity gaps in math. And so I was trying to figure out what's the appropriate number of courses, and so I was looking at the MassCore program, which is the recommended standard for high school for Massachusetts, and it says there's just 4 years of mathematics and 1 year of an arts program. And I hate comparing to another discipline, but I just want to make a point as an example. We have 46 sections in math, which is 11.5 sections per required year according to MassCore. And we have 88 sections in art, music, performing arts, which is 88 sections per required year. And so maybe that can be a good starting point in terms of thinking what the opportunity gaps are in math.
Are those numbers skewed? Because I know that the math class is a whole semester, and the art classes are 2 per semester. So is that 88 actually only like 40? Because it's math only gets 1 credit, but the art gets 2 because it's subdivided.
It's quarters per semester, yes.
That could be a piece of it, for sure. A lot of the art classes are semester only.
Right quarter, I guess.
Yeah. So that's a component of it, as far as sort of earned credits, which we don't have on here, I don't think. And and that's the thing, if you have full year classes, it puts some rigidity into giving kids schedule. Not all the math classes are full year, but many more of the art, music, et cetera, are semester based or shorter in term.
Is there any way that we could find out the numbers for, in terms of students attending the regional high school? For instance, you have regional high school is students attendance 841, which is down 17 students from a year ago, which is roughly around 2%. Is there any way to get the number that were attending, say, 5 years ago?
Short answer is yes. I don't know off the top of my head. But we've had a drop in recent years. Class sizes have kind of shrunk. I wouldn't hazard a guess at the moment, but that drop of 17 is not atypical in the last few years. I think it's going to steady out. If we look at sort of, upcoming classes, there's a fairly steady group of of kids. But I can get that for you.
Anna?
Do we have like a percentage of eligible students that attend the high school? That's like basically how many kids who could be going to the high school are going to the high school, and how many of them are choosing to go somewhere else? Or, and the middle school, for instance, but like, what percentage of our kids are either going to private school or like the Chinese immersion school or
So the
something
number
else?
of choice and charter students, we know very firmly. We are compelled every January to do what's called a school attending children report, where we reach out to all the private schools and say, hey, you got any kids that live in Amherst? Not a tremendous number in that regard. We don't have a ton of folks that go to private schools, some. And the fortunate thing, as much as it bleeds money out of our budget, is that our numbers at charter and choice have been pretty steady. Over the last several years, I think charter's about 85 or so is kind of the number we've been at. But that's it's not growing, which is what we really want to see. If we can shrink it, even better. And we've had years where things happen and we recoup some kids. And then there's years where the reverse happens too. But certainly we can get those as we talk about budget. That can be a piece of the information because it directly correlates there.
Great. Anything else before we move on? Look at us ripping through. Excellent. All right. ARHS Student Handbook Review and Approval. Gabriella?
I'd like to suggest that this handbook include a table of contents.
So I will preface this by saying this was worked on in July, which, from the first 3 pages, you're like, holy moly, what's happened? So that's part of why stuff is what it is in some of those first few pages. But the things from basically page 3 on are and again, we go through a process of updating it each year, vetting it through our legal counsel. The significant change, in this particular handbook is around the cell phone policy. So the sections in and around that are much different than they were in the previous years. Those are the things we're focused on a lot more, some of the nuanced stuff, but I don't disagree that table of contents wouldn't hurt.
For readability and usability by everyone.
Katie?
Thank you. I had sent an email yesterday about this because when I opened it, it did seem like it wasn't the most updated form. But then in looking on the website, the district website, if you click on parent or student handbook, it's a very different document. Mm-hmm. So I was curious as to what has already been made available to students, parents, guardians, and I guess what is the purpose of this document?
So this would be the document that's been made available to students. This would be the one that I believe is on the actual high school. So we have the main website, but then we have the high school website. This is the one that's made available there. If it's linking to a different document, so I looked at one a few weeks ago, and the formatting was all off and some of that sort of stuff. So I think that it may have been one that was in process that got posted erroneously. So there may be a dead link that needs to be updated. Is maybe what you saw. I'm not sure, but this is the actual sort of officially updated one that was made available to students, and I can tell that it's in better shape because just the formatting fits. There were things where the page numbering was off and some of the stuff I was looking at. So this is the one that if you go to the, because I actually did that for putting this on, I went to the high school website, pulled and it's on the main page. So if you go to the high school, you go to the main page and you just scroll to the bottom of the first page, it'll say student handbook. That's this document. Now, if there's another copy somewhere else, it may not be this version. And so if you want to send me that we'll make sure to get it updated, because it could just be a synchronization problem we have with that link.
Yeah, because the one on the district website links you to essentially a Google Doc, and it's very developed in comparison. But I can maybe send that even via this chat. I don't know. Let me look.
We can't really, we are not receiving the chat, so it would just be like displayed on the screen up there. So if you want to send that to Doug, probably an email is best. Thank you. Roger?
Yes, after reading the document, on page 36, it says that parking is $65, but on page 53, it says it's $75. And just to have it right, I don't know which it is.
It's 75.
Okay, well, on
As
page
finance
30,
director, I'm telling you it's 75.
well, I'm not parking, but, you know.
Jennifer?
What is the school committee's responsibility here?
Good point.
It is my understanding that it is more of a formality than a requirement to be reviewed and looked at. Katie? Oh, it's the link is in the chat.
Oh.
But we can't do anything. Yep.
So the agenda item says review and approval, but then the type says discussion. I'm not prepared to vote on anything, we're supposed to vote, but it seems like this document's been created and it's out there, and now we're just reviewing it. It doesn't seem to make sense for us to approve it if it's already been published. So I guess I don't really understand what the school committee's responsibility is tonight. And just as an added thing, I understand this was created in July, but its regional school committee members list is incorrect, even for July.
Yes. Yes, you saw that too. We came on together, and I don't understand why Carrie Spitzer's still there.
Yeah, my guess is they don't really look at that closely, because that's not the part they're worried about changing as much as, quite frankly, I'm not sure why they have it on there at all, because I think I mean, Gene Stammel hasn't been a member for a couple years.
Yes.
You know, Stephen Sullivan hasn't been for a year. So, you know, I'm not sure. In some ways, I find that superfluous information, but it should be accurate. I think nobody double-checked it, to be honest, on what that is. I think to your question about sort of what's the school committee role, I think particularly for the high school, the area where you guys would be wanting to sort of weigh in and offer, you know, feedback on it. And normally we would have done this, you know, in late August, first meeting in September. But if there are changes, particularly to things like discipline or you know, sort of policy-based things, so as they mesh with policy that you guys have or don't, or changes that might then influence, you know, how you might change or adjust your policy. You know, we do have to be compliant with you know, state regulation and law, so that's one piece that you don't really have control over. However, there are other aspects of what's in here that are more about sort of broader policy about how we approach certain things that aren't as dictated by that. So if there were things relative to sort of policy areas that you wanted to, you know, refine or offer comment on or suggestion for, then that's, you know, this is an opportunity to do that.
I'm assuming that that kind of recommendation could be made by this body at any time during the school year, because, for example, the policy committee will be thinking about policies as they review the new documents that will be released and so on. I certainly didn't have enough time to review the full 53 pages to the point where I would feel like I could, other than the table of contents, offer any substantive suggestions. But it seems like the kind of thing that if policy changes and this committee sees areas for change in the document, can those suggestions be made at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty at this point, because this is, been distributed at this point, so it's, in some ways, some of that would be in preparation for next year's version, but nonetheless, if it was something significant, of course, then, we'd sort of, there would need to be some messaging, so like, if we change something significant, so, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, let's say we wanted no parking, right? And so we didn't want to charge anything for parking, and you wanted to make that a decision, then they'd have to reissue this, but then they'd have to message around that sort of separately. It's like, oh yeah, we updated the handbook. By the way, this is the part you need to know. Page 48 has this change, that sort of thing. I think that certainly within your purview, and if you saw something, you can always, there's no sort of limitation on when you can. It's just again, more of it would be things for sort of next editions more often than not, but nothing prevents you from offering comment or suggestion for immediate use too.
William?
I was just going to say on policy BIA, as you're onboarding a new member, you're also, as a member of this committee, you're supposed to have a copy of like 7 different things. And one of those things is student and staff handbooks. So I had reached out a couple of months ago to Sarah Bess and to Doug about not having these, and these were not on the websites, and I couldn't find them on board docs. So I would imagine that's why they're presenting them to us, so I appreciate that. And now I hope that you can find them all in those proper places. And so I don't see anywhere that we need to approve them. I just think that we should have them in our hand, and we should be aware of them. So thank you for presenting them to us.
Anna?
Can I ask how often out-of-school suspension is used in either of the schools? And then is there any, so out-of-school suspension can be very difficult for parents if they work full-time and have 2 working parents. And it can actually be counterproductive to the student because now you're taking them out of school. They're not learning, they're getting further behind, and they're more able to cause disruptions because they're not in class. And so I'm just wondering how often and when out-of-school suspension is appropriate, and I would highly recommend that it is used as little as possible.
So the state has weighed in the same way, basically, over the last couple of years. They've really been very directive to schools about limiting and minimizing, if not eliminating as much as possible, the use of suspension. It depends on the type of offense, obviously. There are things, if there's a particular, sort of immediacy to it, there's what's called an emergency removal. There are requirements about how quickly you have to have hearings relative to that. So we have to take action and follow up as quickly as can. Because again, the idea being we want kids, even in those circumstances, we want them out of school as small amount of time as possible. I think the number of suspension, and this is a sort of policy from the state that came down, it may be as long ago as 10 years ago, but I don't think it was quite that long ago. But the number of suspensions dropped dramatically. The simple case that I always sort of use an example is that, suspending kids for skipping school is sort of rewarding them for that act. It's like, wait, that's upside down logic, right? It's like, you're going to take away something they didn't want to begin with, right? So those kinds of things are done very, very differently now than they were 10 years ago. I don't know off the top of my head, but the number of suspensions is very low other than sort of emergency removal kind of situations, and they're usually sort of health and safety related, imminent threat to safety, personal or school. And again, we try to have our hearings as quickly as possible as required, and whenever possible, try to find other means to exert discipline and suspension. So it's a pretty low number generally, but it's not zero either.
All right. Anything else? Gabriella?
don't know if this would be a motion or just a recommendation, that it would be wonderful to see this document in the future before August. And I don't know if that means in the summertime or at the end of the academic year, but this just seems like the wrong time to be having this discussion about, this particular item. And so if there's something that can be done schedule-wise for the committee in the future, that this item be moved to like a summer discussion. Does this committee meet in the summer?
The one thing I will share relative to the schedule is
May.
this, is that, so it takes a while to go through these. I mean, in as much as, we think these school committee members will get updated, but, which happens in July. And of course, that's also when, people try to take some vacation and get some time, but that's also when our legal counsel does that as well. So, we had deadlines for completing this, I want to say the first week of August. And then council had it for probably a week or so. So, and somewhat depends on how much the school committee meets in the summer. So, in a typical year, school committee generally has a sort of retreat type meeting at the end of August. This could certainly be a part of that meeting as part and parcel of that. So that can be, sort of the.
Yeah, I just think that
The
if
expiration.
it would make sense for the school committee to view this before it actually gets posted. And with enough time that if there are, comments and changes to be made, that those could be incorporated. And this, just for a practicality standpoint.
Hellman?
In support of Gabriella's point, I'm going to quote Chapter 71, Section 37H from Mass General Law. The school council shall review the student handbook each spring to consider changes in disciplinary policy to take effect in September of the following school year, but may consider policy changes at any time.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're early.
Or really late, either way.
Have me
Jennifer?
read that again.
But does school council have a different definition than school committee? Because I think it does.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
There's school-specific councils, which I believe Doug, I saw some email about starting school councils, so that's different from the school committee.
Yes, school councils are distinct from school committee.
Okay.
Still think
Then we could maybe see it after the school council.
Okay.
We're supposed to. We school buildings supposed to have one. Right. Okay.
So,
Point of order.
yep.
The half hour has elapsed.
Okay. I will move that we extend our meeting for, let's go with, I think we can do it in 15 minutes.
Again,
All right, Katie?
Aye.
Irv?
No.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Jennifer?
aye.
Anna?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Tillman?
Nay.
Roger?
Aye.
And Sarah Bass, aye. So 7 yeses, 2 noes, and 0 abstentions. So we have 15 minutes. Okay. So I am going to recommend that we pause on our deep dive into the student family handbook and bring it back in the spring where we can be prepared for next year. I'm also open to other suggestions if we would like to just push it off to the next meeting. Is there any thoughts or feelings? Anna?
Next spring is fine.
Anyone else? Okay. So I'm going to table this for now, and then if it changes and we would like to bring it back sooner than the spring, we can do that. All right, warrant report.
Well, that's me.
Yes, thank you.
Well,
Point
I
of
think
order.
it's a dual. Did you speak to all the warrants you had last time?
Hold on, Jennifer has a point of order.
Future agenda planning is actually the next agenda item.
It's true.
It is true.
Oh, it is, yes, thank you, sorry.
Well, I have it here.
I was trying to wrap us up pretty quickly, okay. Jennifer?
Okay, I have three things for future agenda planning. Can we talk about the status of this committee and hybrid meetings? Because I see Katie here, and this is great. This is better system than we've had in the past when a school committee member needs to be hybrid, needs to be not here, presently here. I didn't realize when I took this seat that this camera was going to be in front of me. I don't really understand what it is or what it's capturing, or I don't think we're seeing what this. So could we talk about how that's all working? Because I'm glad that Katie's able to be here because she's not able to be here in person, but I don't think the meeting was accessible to members of the public this way, and I thought that was what most of our concern was having hybrid meetings that were more accessible to public. So can we just talk about that at a future meeting? I should have brought this up in the superintendent's update, but Doug, can we get an update on the middle school principal search? That would be great. And then I had asked in the past to have an agenda item to discuss creating a subcommittee to go over the one report that we did receive, and that subcommittee would make suggestions on actions the school committee could take. There might have been some misunderstanding that I had said administrative actions, but I merely said actions that the school committee can take. And those recommendations, a subcommittee is not empowered to make decisions on behalf of the school committee. As we've seen with the superintendent search committee, they do the legwork and then comes to the school committee for decisions. So suggestions on actions the school committee take could be things like create a policy on XYZ topic, or ask the policy subcommittee to review a policy, or make this budget recommendation to the superintendent, or recommend that the permanent superintendent hire an assistant superintendent to focus on these things. So things that are within the school committee's purview, those are, and so I just said all the reasons why I think we need the subcommittee, but actually what I'm asking for is an agenda item to discuss whether or not to create this subcommittee. And I think it's even more important now that the Title IX, the 5 redacted reports are going to be published, because that information is going to be out there to the public, and we as the school committee, even though we voted to publish those reports, we need to do more than just publish the reports. We need to now take action on the content of those reports to make things better. So I still feel strongly that we should discuss creating a subcommittee to make recommendations on actions the school committee can take. And I do think this is bigger than just what the policy committee can do. But again, I think that's a discussion we should have as a committee. Thank you.
Any other, William?
I was going to piggyback on that. I think it's important for us to maybe have a future meeting to, I guess, talk about the reports and have a time for the community to be heard after that. So maybe a debriefing session. I'm not quite sure, or it could be something to where Jen was talking about having a subcommittee to maybe that could be more open to the public, so there's more a roundtable discussion and ideas brought back. I'm not sure how that looks, but I think that we, as a future agenda item, or even ASAP, a future agenda item happening even before that, would be a debriefing. How are we going to have these reports out, and what are we going to do immediately as next steps, and how are we going to embrace the community if they want to have a space to talk?
Anything else? All right. Now we will go to the warrant report.
So in answer to William's question to me, I did not speak to those warrants that I signed last time, and now my laptop is dead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not funny.
I'm
But,
sorry.
so I can't speak to them, but there were two that I
Mine's still
signed.
almost dead, too.
I don't know if Doug has them accessible.
20% left.
Next time, okay.
I have two. Do I just read the first page? I've never done this before. that part, not this.
Right,
Yes. I, William Scher, authorize by my signature in the amount of, for the warranted dated, this includes, I authorize payroll in the amount of $866,969.34 on November 15th. Is that it? Okay. Sorry. I will learn.
And you don't have to read the blank lines.
Okay.
I'm sorry, blank lines.
I, William Scher, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $631,086 for general funds. Revolving fund expense of $444.91. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item. Accepting gifts, Jennifer?
I move that the school committee accept the following gifts from ARPS PGO Inc. number 1181 to support half the cost of obstacle course / bounce house for Community Day for a total of $375. And from Cooley Dickinson Mass General Brigham check number 6671670 to support Aaron Buford Grant Award supporting youth well-being for a total of $10,000.
I will second that. And I will also say a super giant thank you. Holy moly. All right. So, Roger?
Aye.
Tillman?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Anna?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Katie?
Aye.
And Sarah Beth, aye. Are unanimously approved. Jennifer?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. I think all right, Katie?
Aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Hannah?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Tillman?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
And Sarah Beth, aye. We are adjourned.